Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast. It is April 6, 2024, and this is Jason Fitzgerald. You can find me on X at Jason_OTC, or you can try to get in touch with me via email, jason@overthecap.com. I know that the email sometimes a little bit hit or miss. I do try to get to everybody's emails. I just don't get as much of an opportunity as I would like to, to go over those things. And obviously, it's been quite a while since I've done a podcast. At least a month, maybe longer. It's just been real busy and, just a lot of things go on. I know every year during free agency, I always say, I'll try to keep up with the podcast. It never really happens. Things just get so busy, and this year's free agency was real fast. This was way more intense than last year's free agency, but, it was a very quick kind of period of time, week and a half, and in that time, trying to track down all these different contracts, get the stuff loaded in. And I think, as most of you guys know, the servers that we had were under real heavy load. I think this was the busiest free agent period I think we ever had. Now, I think it's because of how quick, some of these big deals were coming in over those first couple of days. It was just a very hectic free agency period. May I'll talk a little bit about it. I think that's kind of been beaten to death, and I'm going to do a series of articles where we look at the markets over the next couple of weeks, which really touches on that stuff anyway. But, it was one of those things where between the trades and some of the big deals, this was not free agency last year. Free agency of 2023 was, quite frankly, it was a dud. There were not a lot of good players. They were not very exciting players. The little bit of excitement that there was really was in the contracts for the quarterbacks, which were Daniel Jones and Geno Smith. Those guys signed extensions pretty much right at the deadline. So it was not as exciting as this year, where you did have a lot of really good football players signing contracts, and then you had a couple of guys linger on out there that did end up signing pretty big deals, like a Danielle Hunter. And beer of the night. I'm still digging through old Christmas beers at this point. There was so much stuff that I got for Christmas. So it's a Mad Elf from Trogs. I think that's how you pronounce it tonight. As we dig through this stuff. So that was free agency. That tied me up. And then as I had kind of plans of stuff that we would do going over free agency and going through those things, my daughter got sick, which meant Dad got sick after that, and Dad got hit pretty hard. It was not good. It was the first time I think I've had the flu in, man, I can't remember how long, and it was not good. It was not good at all. It was way worse than when I had COVID a couple of years ago. Basically, I got wiped out for a good 5 days, 6 days, just pretty much totally wiped out, just low energy, just running a fever and everything else. And then, even the week after that, so this was like a midweek kind of thing. Even the week after that, I mean, it was tough. Like I started to try to work out again a little bit, but my breathing was still way off. So by the time I got to, I guess it was last Saturday, I was just like, I have no voice. I'm all mucusy, congested still. I'm like, I'm tired still. It's like, I can't do it. So finally I started to feel better this week. This is the first week where I've really started to, kind of feel like myself again. Feel like my breathing is back to normal. Trying to get back into doing a little bit with the weights. That was, between the foot from a couple of weeks ago, which has gotten better. It's still sore. I'm still not basketball ready yet, but we're getting back to at least doing legs. And, today was able to do a couple of singles, lower than usually I guess I would do, but a couple of singles at 335, and then I just dropped way down on the squats, and I'm still not deadlifting yet. I was like, that's going to push it too much if I do both in one day. So I did at least get those in, and I'll start to build back up in that again, hopefully. But yeah, I was pretty beat up from it. So anyway, that's been the story of like the last 5 weeks or something. So that's really why we haven't done too many of these podcasts. And hopefully I'll get back to a schedule. There will not be a podcast next week. That I can tell you already. My daughter's choir is going away for a competition, Disney. So or not, I don't even. It's not even a competition. It's just something that they're performing in. So we're going to go down there for a couple of days, and we won't be there too long, but it'll cover next weekend. So I know there won't be a podcast next weekend, but hopefully the week after that, it'll be kind of back to a normal schedule for me and no more being sick. That's the main hope. I just want to mention, and then we'll get into a couple of different things here, and then we'll get into your questions, because I know I got a couple of them. I'm not going to be able to go back in the emails because I know I had a lot of email questions in the past couple of weeks. I'm not going to be able to go back to do those tonight. So if you do have an email question that you sent me before, just resend it not next week, the week thereafter, and I'll be able to touch on it in the next podcast if it's something that you're still interested in. Anyway, just one thing I'd like to mention. Brad Spielberger, he got a job working agency side now. So I just wanted to congratulate Brad. Brad has, did a lot of stuff with OTC. It still, helps out here and there with the stuff from OTC. And, he went on and he had a great little run there at Pro Football Focus. And I'm excited for him to, get to jump into the actual NFL space and, work on that side. I think he'll do really well with it. I know he'll do well with the numbers aspect of it, but I just wanted to give a little congratulations to him, for getting that opportunity. We did the book together, the little book that we did on the draft, and there's a lot of teams that use that. I think it's a pretty cool thing, even if they don't necessarily agree with some of the takeaways that were in there. But Brad's a really good guy, and I think he'll do really well. So unfortunately, that means he's probably not going to be on Twitter too much anymore. But hopefully, every now and then he'll be able to pop in there and jump in with some conversations. I know a lot of you guys like to talk with him, and Brad's got a lot more time than I do, so there's a lot more interaction that goes on with there. And it is going to leave a bit of a hole, I think, in the salary cap space. Obviously there's a lot of guys who do the very team specific stuff, right? Like Troy with the Texans, Miguel with the Patriots, Brian with the Ravens, a lot of people that do team specific stuff. And but just in terms of like a more national scale kind of thing where you're going over all these different teams, it's basically myself and Brad. Joe Corey has, he doesn't do as much with the Twitter stuff anymore, and nor do I. So Brad has kind of I feel like Brad has kind of filled that void from me not having as much time doing it. Joel not doing it as much anymore in that respect. So it is a little bit of a loss, more than a little bit of a loss, I think, for the online community, since I'm sure he's going to be limited in what he can do. And it's the one good thing with still being young is you get to, spend more time sometimes doing that stuff. But hopefully we'll be able to, put some things out here and there to kind of keep up with it. And one of these days we'll do some live stuff, whether it's on Twitter, like they used to do in the old days, or something that's a little bit more modernized with like a YouTube thing or something. But, congratulations to Brad, for doing that. And always happy for all the people who have done stuff with OTC, or at least, reached out to me during the years, and, to watch them, their careers expand. It's a really cool thing, because this to me is it's a passion. It's a little bit of it's not a job, it's not my main focus or anything like that. And I always looked at this as something that could be a teaching tool of sorts. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to work as much with individual people anymore to where we're, take on people to help out and stuff like that. I just don't have the time to, to do it. It's not fair to someone to just say, yeah, sure, go ahead and do whatever you want, and you don't get anything from it. But it is always good to see all the people through the years who, have, that I've come in contact with, and just to watch them, working with teams or working with, agencies or media or just whatever. It's a really cool thing, and I'm glad to be, like I always say, glad to be that little part of that NFL thing that's there. So, all right, let's enough with the news updates here and everything else. But so I think the place to start this week, just to keep everything current rather than jumping back in time to free agency or anything else. And don't worry, Jets fans, I'll talk about the Jets at some point. But I think obviously the big news this week was all the Stefon Diggs stuff. And, this is just where there's so many lessons that I think you can learn from this if you are a player. I think if you're a team, I think if you're someone who follows the team, if you're media that covers a team, and that wants to cover it in a pretty unbiased fashion, which I think happens more on a local level than on a national level, even though the national level has a much bigger voice. I don't think there is nearly as much critical thinking that goes on when some of these moves are made. And instead it's more just like, oh, this is great for everybody. And, this is just another example as you get on the team side of things. This is another example why you have to be so careful getting into these third player contracts, especially at specific positions. Like, if you want to take a quarterback, I would actually say there's more risk getting into a second contract with a quarterback than a third. I think the risk on the quarterback side is going heavy into the second deal on kind of a questionable player. And then the next risk on the quarterback comes when you get into that fourth contract, when the player is in his mid-30s and you think they're going to be, Tom Brady playing until he's in his mid-40s. I think offensive linemen are okay to go in on those third contracts. Doesn't always work out, but I think it's a fair one that you can at least get into. Almost any other position, you should be treating the third contract for a lot of those players very similar to the way that you would be looking at the second contract that you would do with a running back. It's like that. There's so many different things that happen, to the way a player plays, the way that you envision his role in the offense or defense. And then when the performance goes down, you just end up with these really bad situations that, really don't have a way to resolve themselves. And no matter what you try to do, there's really no way to placate those situations. And too often, those are the things that happen, right? You come up with all these little things that you think are going to fix something. So there's a problem, right? It was very clear in early 2023 that there was a problem with Diggs and the Buffalo Bills. And these are problems that the Bills thought that they already had avoided by signing him to this big contract extension the year before. Diggs's contract, he had 2 years remaining on his deal when the Buffalo Bills signed him to an extension. Now, signing a player again on a third contract when they have 2 years remaining on it, it just does not make any sense. Like it just really doesn't. Again, especially for these specific positions. Again, if you want to get into it with a quarterback, you want to get into it with an offensive lineman, and you think that that's going to reduce the effective amount of the salary guarantee you have to pay the player, that's cool. That makes sense. Wide receivers, you just don't do it. But they signed him to a contract that was worth $24 million a year. And, you go back to that time frame, and the reason that deal was signed was basically two things. And they are two reasons why you never, ever, ever should be signing a contract. Let me pull up Diggs's stuff on our back, and I'll pull up his history this way. So if you go back to his contract that was from 2018, he was set to earn $13.5 million and $13.7 million in 2022 and 2023, but he had cap hits of $17 and $18 million, or $18 million both years, 17.9, 18.1. The way the Buffalo Bills salary cap was kind of set up, they needed salary cap relief. One of the ways that you can get to salary cap relief is by doing a contract extension versus adding void years and just prorating more money out and then having it hit the cap when his contract expires. So, number one, they were in a position where they needed salary cap relief. So you turn to an extension on that. Number two, in this year, this was the year where you had a number of player contracts that had kind of changed. You had, let me see if I can just pull them up. That year alone, in 2022, that's the year that Tyreek Hill signs for, all right, it's 30, realistically it's 25. Devontae Adams signs for, I think, a realistic number of 22.5 or 23. Cooper Kupp, I think, came later. A.J. Brown is at 25. You can call it 24. Metcalf and Debo, 23.5, 24. I don't remember if they were before or if they were after, but it was well known that was the money that they were looking for. Whether there was issues behind the scenes where, it's like, look, you need to bring my salary up. I need to be up at these levels, or I'm not going to be happy. Or the Bills just proactively were like, well, look, we need to make sure he's happy, right? We've stuck the captain label on his chest, and we want to make sure he's still happy. And, we're going to give him more money because more money is going to make him happy. And, we're going to cut off any problems before they happen. And it doesn't change a thing. It's like if there is an issue that a player has with an organization, whether it's not getting along with the quarterback, whether it's that he doesn't feel his role is, right. And I think that's one of the issues with Diggs. The Bills kind of turned Diggs into a possession receiver. Now, a lot of people are going to look at that and say, Stefon Diggs is not a possession receiver, right? That shouldn't be his role. His role is, to be able to, do some special things and whatever else. You go back in time here, 17.9 yards per catch, 12, 11.9, 13.2, when he's got that big year in 22 again. And then he's down to 11.1. And, it's like you look at this and you're like, my role is different. Like this isn't the role that I want. But, you're looking at someone at this point, he's 30 years old, 29 years old, 30, whatever he was at the time. You lose some of that athleticism. And a lot of times, well, yeah, there are teams that don't use players the right way. I think that's absolutely the case, right? I think that holds true with tight ends more than anything else. But, there are a lot of coaches in the league that I think are very unflexible. I don't know. They're not flexible with the way that they do their offense. It's like, this is my offense. This is what you're going to do. And, I think in Diggs's case, in many cases, it's not the coaching. It's more that you've got the coach evaluating the performance of the player. And it's like, look, we can't use him the same way. He's not that type of player anymore. He's not someone that is gonna, he's not going to be able to do these bigger plays that, maybe the contract calls for. he's a different type of player at this stage of his career. And so obviously he's unhappy about that because no athlete is going to think that they don't have it. Really, until they're retired, you're always going to think that you are the best player on the field. And I think that that's all issues that contributed to this. But, again, if you know the player and you know the things that are, going into it, regardless of what you do or do not pay the player, it's not going to change the fact that he's unhappy. It's like, if you're unhappy with your job and, you don't like the hours, you don't like not being home enough. And that sounds like my son's Discord here. Let's see if I can figure out how to turn that off. That's on a different computer. Let's see if I can mute that. All right, that'll mute that thing. You have a job, you've got whatever, and, you're just like, I'm done. Like, I need to find somewhere else to go. And, you go to talk to the boss, someone in HR or whatever. And, we really need you. You're so important to everything we do here. What if we bumped your salary by 50%? It's like, that's a lot of extra money. And a lot of people, maybe they would take it. And, you go home, you say, hey, look, this is what we're doing. And, it probably makes you happy for a couple of weeks. And then it's right back to the fact that you're just not happy with the job. And the extra money is not going to make you happier. It's not going to change anything. And that happens a lot in the NFL. Like, look, this is one of the issues that all these teams deal with. And I always say this goes back to when we got rid of the old rookie rules from the CBA. In the old system, you basically had wars that happened between agents and teams. And because of those kind of wars that happened when it came to negotiating, you had legitimate, contract stalemates and people willing to dig their feet in, on a point on both sides. And that is completely gone in the NFL now because it doesn't exist with the rookies. And I don't think most of the people that work in the league have the stomach for it anymore. And so you just get to a point where you make this decision where you're just like, look, we're going to throw money at the problem. Everyone will be happy, right? The Ian Rappaport tweets, the bridge has been mended. Everyone hugged it out. They're all so happy. They're all so great. And then 2 years later, you're like, well, why'd they do that deal? There's just no stomach for it when the reality is you need to have a stomach for it. You go back in time, with these different contract disputes. And, I remember the 2010 season where you had players who were so angry because the collective bargaining agreement that was in place at the time eliminated free agency for, 30% of free agents. Instead of someone becoming a free agent, they became a restricted free agent. So you had players, I think it was Vincent Jackson, Logan Mankins, they held out. They didn't come back until it got to the point where it's like, look, your contracts are going to toll if you don't come back and play. So I think it was week 10, they had to come back, and they came back and played. And, it's not like they went out there and they dogged it. You get to the point where you're angry about your contract, but 90% of the time, when push comes to shove and Sunday comes along, these are competitive people. They're not going to go out there and dog it on the field. They're not going to go out there and not practice. There's a couple of cases where that might happen. But look, right now you can go watch the UFL. How much money do those players make? And these are guys, a lot of them who were in the NFL 1-2 years ago. They didn't make the biggest money. They weren't big stars. They go out there every week and they're going to play as if they're the richest player in the world. And that's what happens with 90% of the guys. They will go out there and they will play. You will have a couple of guys who don't, and that's the real problems, right? Well, most of the guys will go and play, but the teams don't want to deal with it. It's just like, whatever. And I think that's kind of what happened with the Bills and Diggs. And, the other issue, when you look back at this contract that they did in 2022, and you see what they've got here, a $21.5 million signing bonus so they can get his cap number down to 11.7. The next year, $16 million as an option bonus. They actually converted that to a signing bonus. Why did they convert it to a signing bonus? Well, I believe they converted it to a signing bonus because they wanted more forfeiture rights. Restructure bonus, 6.8, to get his number down to 14.9, which was as low as they could pretty much get it. I don't think he even earned his workout bonus. I think he just didn't show up. Because why? Why bother showing up? I'm not happy with the team, regardless of the fact that I made $24 million. So, you get into all these different things, and, it just becomes, it's just a problem. And you look at this raise the Bills gave him, from 13.5 to 25.6, 14.5 to 24.4, and they didn't get one contract year out of it. Not one. All they got out of it is they got themselves a second-round pick. They had to give some other picks along with it, so you could argue whether it was a second-round pick or not. In reality, it probably ends up being a third-round pick. But whatever. It's like you made the best of a bad situation at that point. Now, a lot of people ask me, why would you take on that kind of dead money? Why not just keep him? It goes back to the point of you're at that point of no return. You've done everything you can. You've thrown money at him. You've gone public and you've said, we love him. We've talked it out. He had some concerns and he was right with those concerns. All that kind of nonsense that goes on. And what's the reality? Well, the reality is nothing was solved. Nothing was fixed. They were right back to square one with him after last season. Where they were in 2023 is exactly where they were in 2024. So it's like, what do you want to do? If you're the Buffalo Bills, you're rebuilding. People hate that I use that phrase, rebuilding. You're rebuilding. All right. You've got how much dead money do they have? $50-something million in dead money this year. $55 million. You are rebuilding. You want to call it a retooling effort? Be my guest. You're rebuilding. You're trying to get draft capital. You let guys walk because of money. And rightfully so. But you're saying well, why can't we keep him? Why is it $31 million dead? Why don't we keep him? And it's like, again, you just look at it. Do you want your entire season to be every week that he doesn't have 8 catches for 100 yards to be, Stefon, how come you weren't getting the ball this week? You got to ask coach. I don't know. Or ask my quarterback. I don't know why he's not throwing me the ball. Is that what you want to have happen every week after every game? Do you want to have to spend every Sunday night, every Monday, monitoring a Twitter account, Instagram account, whatever social media account, to see what is going to come out about how the coach is screwing up, how your quarterback is screwing up, how everyone is screwing up? The Buffalo Bills last year were not a success because of Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs didn't hurt the team, all right? They weren't a success because of that. They had a disappointing regular season. But, they got hot, a little bit hot at the right time, and they've got a quarterback that is just out of this world. Unfortunately, it's the same generation as Mahomes, so he's probably going to go down as this version of Jim Kelly, except without the Super Bowl appearances. It's going to be all about losing in the playoffs. But, Diggs isn't going to change that. And here's the thing. You can get a second round pick for him. Whatever that is, you can get something for him. And if you play this out another year, all right, you are going to spend over $50 million in cap room on him. And people don't seem to understand that. They don't get that concept. Because if you keep him on the roster, you're spending $27.854 million, right? Okay, that's what you're going to spend on him in cap room this year. Okay? Then the following year, let me just make sure I got that year right. In 2025, you're going to trade him, you're going to cut him, you're going to do whatever. And you've got all this money that's going to be dead. Let me just write down these. What's that going to be? 3 years remaining on those? All right, so you got the $16 million. Okay, so you're going to have to account the following year for $26.294 million in dead money. It's not free and clear like some people seem to think it is. So you're looking at a 2-year investment. That's if I have these numbers right, of $54 million. I thought it might have been a little lower than that. Either way, it's pretty close to it. I thought it was 53. But, whatever. It's a lot of salary cap space. So, you're in a better position, of the salary you're saving this year, right? This minus, 31,096? Something like that, I think, is where they're at. Yeah, 23 million. I'm off on that. So somewhere I have one of these numbers I have is wrong on that. I don't know which one. I know one of those numbers I think is wrong. I have his dead money wrong. 31,096. Somewhere I'm off on that. But basically, you're going to save your salary for this year, which is the $19 million. So somewhere I just threw a wrong number. I just don't know what number I threw in there. That's wrong. But the numbers on that were going to be very high. So, you saved yourself about $20 million in cap room. And the Bills' salary cap next year still stinks. Even with him off the roster already, you're 25th worst in the league. 26th, 25th, something like that. So, you would have been even worse. So at least you've got that, plus you've got that second round pick, that's coming back to you. So I don't understand. I shouldn't say I don't understand it, but you've got to look at the big picture if you're Buffalo. Your options would be to have those 2 later picks in the draft and Diggs for this year be about $20 million worse with your salary cap in 2025 and probably not get anything back for him next year because the situation is probably going to become so toxic. You're not going to get back a 2. And quite frankly, you're lucky to even get that back, right? None of these other guys who've gotten traded have gotten that. We saw these franchise players get traded and they weren't even getting that. So, that is a bad spot for them. Sorry, just got some news from my daughter that she's I don't know if she was happy or not. Rhea Ripley has won at WrestleMania. Yes, tonight is WrestleMania night, but obviously not watching that. We don't really ever watch it. We don't have Peacock, but my daughter is always bugging about getting it. So one of these days, maybe we'll go. She really wanted to go to WrestleMania this year. I was like, oh, no. So anyway, maybe if it was somewhere warmer and not Philadelphia. Anyway, but back to the Bills. It was a bad spot for them. They made the best of a bad situation. They made the best possible outcome that they could have with the hole they backed themselves into. When you look at that $31 million in dead money, don't look at that $31 million as an impediment to releasing the player. Now, notice they waited a long time to do it, and I think part of the reason was they needed to make sure that their salary cap was in order to do this. Last year, they didn't have that option. It was going to be way too hard on their cap to do anything with him. So they waited until, you got through the period of free agency. They have an idea of where their salary cap is going to stand, and you get to the point where it's like, okay, we were able to navigate the salary cap without touching his contract. So it's only going to cost us an extra couple $1 million in cap room this year to trade him. We can do it. And that's why they didn't release him. That's why they let the salary vest. Or was his salary already vested? I actually don't remember. No, his salary got guaranteed this year. So that's the reason that they waited, was because they figured they could get a trade partner for him. But, you want everything to play out, properly there. And just, when you look at that number, again, what that number tells you is the mess they made of the contract, the mess that was made by extending him versus just making him play out those last 2 years. That's what that tells you. That tells you that mistakes were made in the past, not so much about mistakes being made in the present. It's not the 31 million dead that's the problem. It's how they got to the 31 million dead. That's the issue, at hand for the Bills. Now you get to Houston. So why does Houston make this move? So Houston makes the move because you are all in on a rookie quarterback, and you far exceeded any expectations that you could hope for, last year. So you are going all in, right? You did a trade and a crazy extension for Joe Mixon. You did a pretty wild contract for Danielle Hunter, which you didn't fully guarantee it by like two $500,000 per game bonuses. Why? Well, you didn't want to set that precedent of having a fully guaranteed contract. I mean, silly, right? But this is just another piece. You are just taking a stab at it, that you've got a big name player. He can still play. Now, his statistics maybe are a little bit overinflated at this stage of his career based on the fact that he was the number one target, on that offense. May or may not be on your offense. You've got other weapons in your system, but you take a shot at it. And I think it's when you have that rookie contract window, you have to take risks. You have to do it. All teams have to take risks. And look, I complain all the time when teams do stuff, but it is absolutely true. You do have to take risks. It's just that the risks should be smart risks. I think this is an okay risk. Given where you're at, you don't need him to be productive every week of the season. You need him to be productive every now and then. Now, why they did what they did with his contract, that's a different story. Now, I think this probably gets you back to the Buffalo points as well, as to where you're just sick with it. I am sure that the belly aching about a contract probably was going on behind the scenes in Buffalo too. Because it's not like Houston made this trade and on the same day they made this trade, they're like, hey, listen, we want to give you like a $3.5 million raise for next year, and we're going to let you be a free agent in 2025. Like, you were under contract for 3 years. No, we want you to be a free agent. It's all hugs and kisses. And he's like, I never expected that. Come on. That was probably being talked about with Buffalo. I want more money now. So, they went out there and they did this. Now, why did they do it? So, do I think it's a good move? No. I think that if you want to do something like this, you probably should do something to where the player can earn the void on the contract, by hitting some kind of incentive. If you want to dangle something out there, dangle something realistic, versus just going ahead and doing it. moving $3 million up that was only injury guaranteed is asinine. All right? There should not be that kind of desperation to make this trade that you go and do that, because that's not money that he had guaranteed. It was injury protected. All you have to do, even if you're going to void out, some of the contract, throw in 2 dummy years, let's say the dummy year salaries are $3 million and $2 million, and he got hurt. Well, he would qualify for injury protection. That injury protection would equal whatever he was going to earn in his contractual injury guarantee, right? Because the CBA gives you certain levels of injury protection. Even if your contract voids, you're still eligible for it. Up to whatever those P5 numbers are, up to a certain amount. So you could have done that for 2 years in there and not had to pay it this year. It still would have functioned. It still would have been a functional injury guarantee versus giving him a raise. So to me, that's a stupid move by Houston. Now, some of the other stuff with it, I get it. They're trying to be the good guys here. You're trying to send a good message out to other players around the league, and it's what everybody said. Well, you want this guy on his best behavior, and one of the ways you think he'll be on his best behavior is if you dangle free agency, that if things aren't going his way, he can't explode, because if he explodes and he starts going nuts about the team, that might impact what he can do next year. I don't think that really makes that kind of a difference. I don't think that these gimmicks, as a Jets fan, I've seen plenty of gimmicks through the years. I don't think these gimmicks work. I don't think they make someone happy. I don't think they make them play better. Maybe once in a while, maybe it will. But I think this is more about looking at next year and saying, okay, what are the odds that those situations, and I think you've avoided all the negativity that comes with a player release in February or March, because now the contract's just going to void out. Now, why do they use all these void years here? Well, that does give them flexibility in the event that something happens and they love it, and he loves Houston, and you can come to a reasonable agreement on a extension. That's about the same price as he was going to make before. What was he going to make before? 18 million, 19 million, 18 million in those last couple of years. Something around that number. You might be able to work that out. And this number here, this cap number that you see on the screen, if you're watching along, at $16.6 million, you only have to account for 4.1 of that, 4.16 of it, plus whatever salary you pay him on top of it. So it gives you more opportunities, more flexibility with your cap. to do some things with it. But I think in general, just voiding out the contract was a mistake by them. A lot of people, a lot of big name reporters were putting it out there like this is an attempt to recover a compensatory pick to make up for the fact they're giving him a 2. No, it doesn't work that way. They don't get a compensatory pick for him if he leaves. You can't shorten a contract to try to game the compensatory system. So he is not a compensatory free agent next year if his contract does just void out and he becomes a free agent. So that's it from Houston's side. Now from the player side, what can you learn? Be a pain until the teams want to show any kind of willingness to battle over this stuff. Just go out there and ask for the moon. Be angry. Be mad. Be terrible. You don't want to go as far as Antonio Brown taking his shirt off and running around the end zone Jets game. But, if there was something that you learned with Antonio Brown from years ago, it was the crazier you can act, the more money you will make. And that's what this is. Stefon Diggs has now ended up with a 1-year contract for $43 million. $43 million. He got a raise from the Buffalo Bills on those 2 years, right? He was, now I know he didn't earn the money on the workout, but let's just say he did, in there because he could have. He chose not to do that. So he earns a raise from Buffalo for those 2 years of annoying the Buffalo Bills. Let's just pull up the numbers here of $20.89 million. Now, he was scheduled to earn another $19.05 million, which would have brought his 1-year payout in new money to $39.89. But because Houston wants him on best behavior, they were able to convince him to bring that salary up to $22.52 million. So let's throw that in there. Where's my numbers here? So it's a 1-year extension now because he's going to be a free agent. 1-year extension for $43.4 million. That's insane. That is insane. The franchise tag isn't this high. The quarterback franchise tag number wasn't this high. This is like the new gold standard in manipulating NFL football teams. His agent should be enshrined in the Hall of Fame for this. Like that is how brilliant this is from his perspective. Just insane money. I think there's only 2 players at wide receiver that have earned more than that for 1 year. It's Devontae Adams at $43.36. Maybe that's it. Because if you take out that $250 or whatever, I mean, it's just nuts. And these are players here. When you look at these players, they do have other years of the contracts they have to honor. He's going to be a free agent. And if he stays on best behavior, he'll get something. All right, now I'm sure he's looking at this and you're saying, well, you can get a contract like Mike Evans. You get another 23 next year. That's a raise over what you were going to earn before. You go out there and you get 1,000 yards. That's what you're aiming for. So, I mean, this is all you have to do. If you are an NFL team, I know there's people that work in the league. Look at the numbers that have worked out here. 1 year, 43.4, because you didn't want to have the backbone to deal with the contract in the first place, and you just bent over backwards, did whatever to make him happy. That happiness disappeared pretty quick, and he manipulated a second football team into doing this. 43-4 for 1 year. Nuts. So if you are a player, look at this. Just act like Diggs. If you are a good football player, whatever position you play, I don't care. You just go and just be unhappy. Go and be unhappy on the sidelines. Be unhappy in the media. Be unhappy on Instagram. Be unhappy on Twitter. Be unhappy on Snapchat. I don't care what you use. Be unhappy. Be mad all the time. The teams will just say, well, a raise will make you happy. Sure. Okay. So, that's what you learn out of this. That's from the player angle on this. It's absolutely what you earn. You learn. Just be unhappy. And that's what it is. The teams are not dealing with this. Not that well, at least. All right. So that's enough. I ranted about that for a long time, but it's a really interesting situation, and there's just so many angles to it between the Bills, the Texans, and Diggs. I just think there's so much that you can learn from this. And there's so many different things that teams should be learning. They won't. They should. There's different things players should be learning. That could happen. And it's just understanding about the way trades are working. And when you look at really so many players in the league, so you've got, now Devontae Adams is like a pseudo trade. But, you look at some of these big deals here. Tyreek Hill was a trade. A.J. Brown was a trade. You don't have that investment, in the player. You go on defense here. These guys weren't traded. But, I mean, like, you go back to the days of Khalil Mack, resetting the market. That was a trade that pushed those numbers there. Bradley Chubb getting to 22. That's based off a trade. Brian Burns at 28 too. That's a very different kind of trade, but that comes off a trade. Jalen Ramsey getting to 20 when he got traded to the Rams. These teams that trade for players, especially with existing years on the contract, Burns doesn't fit that category. They view these contract extensions very different. They're very willing to deal with new money because they don't feel like they have any real investment in that old money that existed in the contract. So, even with Diggs, they're just looking at this, the 19 to 22. It's like, look, we can't find a player of Diggs' caliber, and if we did, we would have no problem paying him $22 million for a year. So, it's the trade market, especially for a lot of these teams that have a young quarterback or have this kind of all-in attitude that they're going to go for. Those are going to be real market movers in the future. It's not going to be the regular extensions for the most part. I think it's going to be the guys who get traded or the guys who are able to kind of punch their own ticket, the way Aaron Donald did or something, like that with the Rams. So, a lot of things, like that I think are at play. So anyway, since that took so long, maybe I won't do as many of these other things that I have open here, but we'll see. But, I'll talk about the Jets for a minute here. The Jets make the trade for Son Reddick. The Jets offseason has been very interesting as a fan of the team. It is very Woody Johnson centric, right? It's like you're going after name talent. It's name talent that probably doesn't cost you too much money. It's name talent that has a lot of injury history to some of it. But you're putting together. You just hope this is not going to be like the 1993-ish. I don't even remember what year it was when they've got like Ronnie Lott and Art Monk and all those guys. You're hoping that the Band-Aids hold together for most of the year. The Jets, more than any team this year, and I didn't get a chance to run all the numbers, and maybe we'll do that one of these weeks in the future. The Jets put a ton of money in terms of annual contract value, on their team in free agency and trade this year. So, by free agency, I mean, it's not a big number, overall, that you can see it's $72 million, there, but they added a lot more by trade. But, the players that they added, they're all just there for a year. I think Simpson is the only one that got a 2-year deal. The only other contract they signed that's 2 years is the C.J. Mosley one, which really was more of a salary cap kind of thing. It was something they should have done the year before. They didn't do it. I don't know why, but they did it this year. And because he had less years remaining on his deal, he was probably more open to it. But it's like they didn't want to make these long-term commitments. And you can see that, I think, with this move, which is, they trade for Reddick, instead of keeping their own pass rusher. And, so if we look at, let me see if I can find him here. Whoops. Huff is $17 million a year. His first year cash is only 17, but you'd be locked in at 34. Reddick's salary for this year for the Jets, I think, is 14. It's either 14 or 15. And there's nothing next year, because he's a free agent. Now, I don't want to get into this nonsense of, compensatory picks that they're going to get for him. Nobody wanted to trade for him. So don't think that, there's some magic number that's out there that you're going to get for him. $14.5 million is the salary that they're going to owe him. The Eagles picked up $1 million. This other bonus is incentives that he can earn based on performance. I don't have those in there right now. I'll have to update that. But the basic deal that's there, there's no need in really pulling up the stuff. They're going to give up a third-round pick for him. Could be a second. Now, the Jets are going to have to manage his snaps to make sure it's not a second. Those are all numbers that he's traditionally gotten, to hit that. So I think what the Jets probably should do is just talk to him and say, look, early in the year, we're going to ease you into it to keep your numbers down a little bit lower. And the plan is by the end of the year, you're going to be on the field your usual 70% of the time. We just need to keep you under 67, or whatever that number, that threshold is, to make sure we hold on to a number 2. Because, again, you don't want a player to feel like the trade terms are preventing him, from getting on the field. Because if he feels that way, one of the things that's going to happen is he's going to feel a little upset, like, this is my contract year. I need to be best foot forward. I don't want it to not be best foot forward because you're afraid of losing, a higher draft pick. So I think you do that early in the year, because what you do late in the year and in the playoffs, if you happen to make it there, has usually much more of a bearing on your next contract than what you do early in the season. So I think the Jets will manage his snaps early in the year. And, then they'll use him, more than that, more often, closer to his usual time. I don't think the Jets are going to do as much rotating as people think. I think that he's much more of a full-time player. I just think it'll happen later in the year. But, it's an interesting discussion as to, what's more valuable, $34 million over 2 years for Huff or $15 million for 1 year for Reddick. Plus losing the third-round pick. And I think that's a legitimate discussion point. Now, Reddick is a better player than Huff. Huff probably has more upside to his game. I think the pressures that Huff creates are a little bit more play-changing than Reddick. I think Reddick is a non-stop... I'm trying to think of how to... I don't want this to sound as a negative. You don't give up on plays, and you're constantly doing stuff, and that creates things. Now, I know that there's numbers out there about how fast he gets the quarterback and that kind of stuff. Just little bits and pieces that I watch of the highlights of him. I think it's a lot of endless energy, never give up kind of pressures versus, Huff's just, I'm in your face the minute you get the ball. But Reddick is a much better overall player. And when you look at the swap, in a sense, between the two football teams, I think it kind of makes sense, right? The Jets were never going to play Huff more than 45% of the snaps. And it's very hard to invest $17 million a year in a player that you're not even going to play 50% of the time. The Eagles probably envision Huff to be a 60 to 70% playtime guy. They're going to try him in a role. They're going to see if they can utilize him more, and he's a much younger player. And they're looking at this more from the long haul. From the Eagles' perspective, it's a kind of a brilliant trade, right? Reddick's not happy with his contract there, not happy with his role there. So, even if you had him on the team and you had him play that out, he's not going to get a contract in free agency that's going to get you a third-round comp pick. No chance. So, there are very limited chance. I can't say no chance, but very limited chance. Now you don't have to deal with it. The Jets are giving you that with an option to get even more. So to me, that's a no-brainer for the Eagles. I think that's a genius trade by them. You go through those numbers and you see where that stuff is. I don't care if the return is an extra year down the line. Who cares? Second-round pick is a second-round pick. A third-round pick is a third-round pick. There's no devaluation. That devaluation stuff is so stupid. Smart teams take advantage of that all the time. Do you think right now the Panthers are looking at this and saying when they don't have the first overall pick in the draft, that they look at that and go, oh yeah, it was really, it's not like we don't really have the first. We gave up a second-round pick. Come on. Like, we've got to get off this with the draft. Got to get off with these devaluation of picks. So the smart teams, that have GMs maybe that have some kind of job security, they can go off that. And they did. And, the Jets overpaid, I think, to bring him in. But whatever, he makes the team better this year. Right now, I think the Jets' upside is probably a one-and-done wild card kind of team. They could win the division. I don't think the loss of Diggs is that kind of negative impact on the Bills. I think the Jets are better than the Dolphins. But I don't think that the Jets are necessarily better than the Bills because the quarterback is so good, and I don't know what Aaron Rodgers is going to be. I think the only thing for the Bills is if the Bills 100% knew they were going to trade Diggs at the beginning of free agency, I think they may have made a play to keep Gabe Davis, or they might have done something a little bit more, try to do something a little bit more with the wide receiver room. I think, the Jets, there's a lot of age. They need a wide receiver. I kind of feel like the Jets are pigeonholed into drafting a tackle with their first pick. You've got two old tackles on your line. Now, Moses really hasn't been hurt. Smith is hurt all the time. I know the Jets came out and said, well, they evaluated, different offseason protocols, and, you're keeping guys at one position, and you think that's going to help them. Look, Smith is a great football player. Historically, these last couple of years, you get 2 games out of him or you get 12. You never get 17. You just hope if you get 12 games that, you miss a couple of games maybe in the middle of the season. You hope you're opting in. There's nothing you can do that's going to change that. There's just not. Elijah Vera Tucker's injuries, I think, are more flukish than anything else, but, whatever. But I think you're almost pigeonholed into it because when Smith inevitably goes down, I think you need somebody that you can bring in. And you didn't bring in another veteran. So I think you need to go into the draft and you need to get somebody in the first round that, you're okay redshirting. But, come week 8, when Smith is going to miss 5 games, you need someone you can plug in there, that has high upside, high potential. So I almost feel like you're locked into doing something like that. But, I guess we'll wait and see. What were some of the other things I wanted to talk about here? So I got the Bills trade, cornerback contracts from 2024. So rather than getting too much into this, you can look into this if, you go on OTC. So this is something we're going to do for a couple of different positions this year. But it's looking at the different positions and looking to see what happened this offseason in them. So you got Snead at 19-1, Johnson at 19, Wouzier at 12. Taron Johnson gets 10-5. That was an extension, $10 million for Kenny Moore. Murphy Bunting 8-5, which is crazy contract. 7-5 Darius Williams. That's a really solid deal for the Rams. Kendall Fuller 7-5, Nixon 6, Robertson for 6-2-5. Those are your top 10 deals signed this offseason. And just some stats that I have here. Yards prevented, that's just something that I look at where you're looking almost at like a net yardage, almost like from a fantasy perspective. And you can argue with some of the numbers in there because I'm giving some credit for receptions as well, in that kind of formula. But, it's basically how often you're on the field, how often you're covering. It's not going to get really into it to where you're looking at, how many... the type of routes that you're covering. All right, now I'm sure people can get into it. I can't. I don't have that kind of data access. But, just a generalized, like, if you're playing in the slot, if you're playing outside, what's your expected yardage total? You're getting bonus if you get an interception. You're getting a negative if you give up a touchdown, even though that's kind of a fluky play. But you look, and it's not a surprise. Snead's very good. Johnson's very good. Jalen Johnson, Taron Johnson's very good as well. Kenny Moore, those guys are playing in the slot, so those are higher percentage passes usually. Darius Williams been good. He got bumped out, I think, because of changes that they're looking for in defense. You're just looking to change your mix because they weren't successful last year, didn't make the playoffs. The Awuzie one, that's your question mark. Not great last year, older player. Murphy Bunting. As I wrote down in the article, that's a bet on draft status, right? He's a second-round pick, I think, because there's nothing that indicates he should be making $8.5 million with $15 guaranteed. He should be down, in this, at best, $6 million range per year with $6 million guaranteed. So, excuse me, I don't know what the Cardinals were thinking. So we've got cash salary comparisons, and you can see why I like the Jalen Johnson deal more than the Snead deal for the player. He gets 28 in year 1 versus 25 in year 1. And even though Snead gets the slightly higher APY, it's all based on, salary in that 4th year. By year 2, they're identical. Year 3, they're identical. So all they did was give the Jalen Johnson contract fully guarantee more money up front. So he does have a better guarantee package. Basically then say, how much extra money do you need to get above the APY? We'll just throw that all in year 4, which most players don't earn. Now, the full guarantee is nice for Snead. That's actually a big jump for the market. Getting to 68% of that deal guaranteed, I think that's a big move forward. But, one of the things I'd say is I think when you look at that breakdown, that 3rd-year guarantee is around $7.5 million. And I don't think that that's a coincidence that that's the exact number that you see here on the screen for Darius Williams. That's like if you've been cut from your contract and you're still somewhat effective, you're going to earn $7.5 million, $7 million in a guarantee, whatever it is. So, when you go back to this, and if you are, a team. I'll leave that open if I want to look at contract growth. Let's get rid of the cap stuff. Let's pull up Snead's deal here. If you get into this year 3, which is where that guarantee exists at 7.5, he has a $21 million cap hit, 17.5 to release, 3.5 saved. If things are going downhill for the Titans, going downhill for him, as long as they don't do anything crazy in 2025 to bring this cap number down to where the dead money here gets to a point where it does become difficult, to release the player. This kind of contract structure creates a situation where you basically go in there and you say, listen, we're going to release you, or, you can earn a salary this year of $7.5 million or $10 million, whatever number you want to throw in there. But it's going to be a number very close to the guaranteed salary of 7.5. And that's kind of a market rate at that point. So I'm not saying that it's a meaningless number. It's not a meaningless number, but it's a number that's based. It's a number that's based on past performance. It's a number that's based on market studies. It's a number that's based on math. I think absolutely that's how that works out. And we've got a guest appearance of Megan, who is showing me that Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson are at WrestleMania. Is that very exciting, Megan?
Yes.
Okay.
I could be there.
I know you could be there one of these years. Okay. Goodbye, Megan.
We'll go next year.
Sure. We'll go next year. I don't know where it's at. You heard that here first, but yeah, there's no going to WrestleMania next year. But Jason Kelce, Megan is a big fan of the Kelces, mainly because Travis Kelce is dating Taylor Swift, but she also likes the Jason Kelce kids. So, there you go. So, anyway, it's a soft market for corners. That is not changing. I think that's very clear. You've got 2 franchise players, neither of whom came anywhere close to a record-setting contract, neither of whom came anywhere to pushing a market. The return for Snead was very light. I mean, that was a return of the Chiefs don't really want you. And, I almost think that, when you look at the CBA and you look at the rules, the NFL and the Players Association did agree on rules that you can't get more in compensation for a player. And in a sense that's like kind of quarterback protection. Like, they don't want you franchise tagging a guy and then getting like 4 first-round picks or something for him. It's that you're kind of capped off based on what the tag is. But I almost feel like there should also be a minimum return threshold, because it's not fair to tag players just for the purpose of trading those players. And we're seeing a lot of that. It's like, if you're going to trade those players, that should be decided in year 4, year 5, when they're on their rookie contract. It should not be utilizing the franchise tag to limit their actual free agent market. So I think that's a change that needs to happen in the next CBA, that they need to get rid of this nonsense of we can franchise tag a player and have a return of, like a 3rd-round pick or a 2nd-round pick or something. Like, there needs to be at least a 1st-round pick that's involved in your trade compensation you get back for the player. Unless it's an in-season trade. You can do whatever for an in-season trade, but an in-season, I would say after 1 week is played, that's something that needs to change. But, it's soft market. And I think as we look back at these deals, it's probably going to be Sauce Gardner that's the next guy that pushes it forward. I mean, maybe there's an outside chance of someone like Surtain or something like that. Too much, but maybe an outside chance. But I think you're going to have to get one of these really highly drafted guys who's actually great, to really push it, because the other positions have a lot more kind of going on there, and that's not the case there. Had an article looking at contract growth, so you can go and check that out. So, I do a lot of consulting on the side, or a good amount, I don't even know if it's a good amount anymore, consulting. But, some of the stuff that we do where we look at the markets, we break things down. And typically top 5 players at a position are kind of a category to themselves, 6 through 10, 11 through 20, and then 21 through 32. I think that's a very fair way to evaluate markets in the NFL. And for this year, I wanted to look at the growth, those positions. Guard exploded. Top 5 is up 8%. 6 to 10 is up 13. 11 to 20 is up 29. 21 to 32 is up 55. That's huge growth at those positions. Now, they're not going to keep growing like that, but this steadies out, right? It's like inflation. You hit a point and rarely do the prices come back down. Typically they remain up. Now, once in a while you do get market corrections. That has happened with Guard before. But I don't think that'll be the case here, at least for the time being. Interior defensive linemen up 5-7, then they're up 7-4, and then they're not really up at all, players 11 to 20, and very limited 21 to 32. So, you're seeing that investment at the top of the market. Now, this doesn't include the Brown contract, just came down. Had some questions about that. Why is this the case? Why isn't Edge getting that kind of bump? And, if you look at Edge this year, top 5 players are barely up. 6 to 10 is up 3.5%. 11 to 20, though, is up 12 to 9. Then just 4.9%, 21 to 32. I think that's a big reason why, when you look at those numbers, I think the value of a pressure that comes from the interior is pretty strong. It's not something a lot of teams can practice against. It's not something a lot of teams really prepare for because there's not a ton of players that have those real athletic guys on the inside that can do that. Now, I do think there's a couple of teams that have probably gone a little too overboard where, they're looking at certain players who probably fit more of a still... It's not like the old run stuff or being, 350-pound nose tackle, but, someone who is probably not enough of an impact in the passing game, even if they play a lot of snaps. Maybe Brown even fits into that category, but, that's the part of the bubble that will probably burst at some point. But I think in general what's happened is that it's a unique skill set that allows you to get that pressure from the interior. So if you have one of these players, you're not really going wild over the contract. When you get into the edge rushers, there's a lot of guys who are good edge rushers, but not Nick Bosa's of the world. And I think that's what we see, is that the league has determined that there's probably like 5 really special pass rushers, 6, 7 special guys. And after that, there's a lot of interchangeability between players. Like that discussion with Huff and Reddick. You go back a couple of years ago, the year that Matt Judon was a free agent, and it was a real soft market for pass rushers. Like, it didn't make any sense based on, really what past trends had been, where players who had shown even like a little bit of ability were getting big free agent contracts, relative to what the cap was at the time. So I think teams look at it now and they're kind of like, well, there's a lot of good pass rushers, and we can find a lot of good pass rushers for $15 million, $14 million, $13 million. So we don't need to spend 25, 26. But the interior, those players aren't there, and that's why you don't see that growth, 11 to 20, 21 to 32. It's like that's where we get into the more traditional roles where you're getting good, solid, all-around kind of guys. But they're not, they're not creating havoc on the inside. So, they don't really push the market that much. So I think that's kind of what you have, happening there. As you get down, you look at center. Center's down 4-2 at the top, 9-2 the next range, 23-5, 31-2. Left tackles are down at the back end, 33-4, 28-5. And so some people did ask me, well, it's like, that's a 1-year thing, so you're not really getting anything from it. So yeah, right now it's 1 year, and obviously there's plenty of time for contract extensions to change these numbers, right? These numbers really aren't solid until September. This is just an early look, at the way things are going. But if you look at center, center is a position that has lagged the salary cap for years. So while this year is at the moment is maybe worse than others, the trends have been pretty consistent with center. That you've got a handful of teams that value center as a position to potentially draft high, pay high. But a vast majority of the league has now determined that center is a kind of plug-and-play position. It's very different than where it was, a decade ago, a little more than a decade ago, where, you weren't drafting centers for the most part in the first round, but, you did look at it as a position that you really wanted to fill with a good player, and if you drafted that guy in second, third, fourth round who was really good, you didn't mind extending him. Now it's more like, you can go and we'll just fill you with somebody else. I think when we look at left tackle, we've reached a point where teams don't want to overpay sometimes for these veterans. Now, this I would say at the moment is a little bit more short term. We had a lot of guys take pay cuts this year. So you have to wait to see how this shakes out over the long term. I would say that's one that fits a little bit more of that role. But center is something that has been trending downward for some time. Corner, that they've been soft. I just mentioned them before. Safety, this was a bad year for safeties. It was a good year in terms of the available players. You had a lot of good players available in free agency, but you had a lot of guys that got released, and a lot of teams that decided to invest their money elsewhere. So, I always find safety to be a real interesting position. And so we'll have to see how that bounces back. But, you can check that out. And we'll do another one of these in September time to see where things are going. And I'll post the numbers over a, longer period of time. I just didn't have the, I think when I actually put this one up, I think I was still actually kind of sick. So I didn't really have the energy to go and dig up my files where I was looking at, all the growth from the other years to check those things out. But you can look at that, and it gives you an idea, I think, as to where contracts are headed at certain spots. Let's see what we've got here. So this is the only other thing I wanted to touch on before we get into questions here. And that's the new kickoff return rules. And I think these will be interesting, to see what happens. I don't know if I'm in favor of this or not. I loved the XFL. I really loved that XFL in 2020 that got canceled by COVID. I thought that was a shame because I thought they were on to something. The broadcast teams were great. The broadcast quality was great. I thought some of the new rules they put in were unique. I don't know sometimes if I like that uniqueness necessarily coming into the NFL. But we're going to see. They're trying to get something with returns. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how teams approach this. So I was looking up the numbers for players that, the positions that traditionally play on kick returns, kickoff coverage. So these are the players that had, I think it was at least 25 snaps, I think was the filter that I used here. So you can see linebackers heavy in kickoff coverage, followed by corner, followed by safety, kickers. Yeah, they're kicking the ball. Edge, wide receiver, running back, tight end, fullback, punter. I don't know. How's a punter on there? I might have something that was wrong in some filter on that, unless that's punters who were kicking off. I mean, maybe. That seems too high. It's only 4 players. So I must have something that I had wrong in my filter there. Interior defensive lineman. Then you get into kick returns. Linebackers very high, tight ends very high, safeties very high, wide receivers are next, then your corners, running backs, and then a big drop to edge, fullback, interior defensive line, and centers that are out there. Let me just go grab another drink, and then we'll jump back into this. All right. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how teams kind of change their composition. I don't know if it's going to happen, this year or next year. But I do think it'll be something that's interesting to watch kind of in undrafted free agency. Because my feeling is, number one, I think you might see more running backs return the football. And I don't know what just happened to my camera here. Sorry if you're watching along. All right, I think it's back in focus. Looked like it just completely went out of focus. I think that one of the things that you'll see is on kick returns. I think you might see more running backs return the football because the way the field is set up, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be that big burst. I think it's going to be more about kind of finding the hole, being able to get through it, and then doing your big burst. So looking at the returns here, I think tight ends will be way down. I don't think you're going to see as many tight ends being used on kick returns. I know that there are some blocking tight ends, but I don't know. I kind of feel like that's going to be replaced a little bit more by, I think you could have certain offensive linemen out there, at least a little bit, and I think you might have more edge players, who are out there doing that as well. I think that might be something, maybe a little bit more interior defensive line, but I don't think so in that regard. But I think there might be some more edge players because I think that is it's a shorter field, and I think there's probably more value to carrying extra edge guys, on your active roster if you can use them on special teams, versus anything else. Now, kickoff coverage, I look at this, I still think your linebackers are going to be used to a pretty high level. I think your safeties are going to be used to a high level. I think your edge players have to go way up, in terms of usage. I would say almost up to the corner level, because I think with the way that some of these plays are, I almost feel like your safeties should be that kind of that coverage. If the running back breaks through, they're going to be the guys that are going to try to track the person down and tackle them. And you might have a corner or two that does that as well. But I almost feel like your defensive ends are more players who are going to be pretty good at preventing the runner, whether it's a wide receiver, running back, or kick return specialist, from really getting through those lanes, more so than a corner, because you're eliminating a lot of that run-up part, which is, why you need some of these guys that have more speed. I kind of think that that's going to be the case. Wide receivers, I think that might be similar on coverage. That probably comes down on kick returns a little bit there. So I think that that's going to just be interesting things to look at. I think what would be real interesting, I don't think teams in the XFL did this though, but, if the way the rules work here, really the hang time of the football, doesn't make a difference. So unless you've decided that you're going to kick the ball through the end zone, which I think most teams are probably going to do, but if you're playing in the colder weather areas, that might be hard in December. I would love for teams to really think out of the box and say, do we have a safety or a corner on our team? I think those two positions that can kick a football. I mean, maybe you can throw a wide receiver in there, but I'd look at a defensive player. can we have a safety kick off the football? Keep the ball in bounds. I don't care how high the ball goes because we don't have a lot of ground to cover anymore, right? Because this is almost like running behind an offensive line. It's almost like being in shotgun running, offensive line. I don't need time for my coverage team to get there. They're basically already there. As soon as the ball, as far as I know at least, I think the way that it works is as soon as the ball is caught by the returner, that the play is live, right? I think that rather than having a kicker back there, because a kicker's not really having a defender. So it's almost like 10-on-10 blocking with a kick returner, or it might be 10-on-9 with 2 kick returners, because I think you are going to see a lot of teams that throw 2 guys back there to try to reverse field, do some tricky stuff. That you might see some of that, but I think actually having someone that can kick the ball, get down the field, and be an athlete makes a lot more sense than having someone that can get more hang time on the ball, drive the ball further, but probably not be someone that's going to stop a play. I mean, once in a while I see a guy get in the way or whatever. I think there's going to be more value to finding a defensive player that can kick. So I think that'd be interesting. If a team wants to think outside of the box and say, is there a kid playing safety who maybe played soccer early in high school or in grade school or whatever, and he can come out there and he can still kick a ball? Can you teach somebody to do it? Because you don't need all that other stuff that comes with being a kicker. Like, now you can't have a guy that shanks every kick and, they're getting the ball at the 40 or whatever. But, just somebody that's capable of kicking the ball to the 15-yard line or something like that. I think that there could be a lot of value in that, because that player off the kick can not only get down the field and be an extra defender, which actually gives you an advantage because there's not as many blockers. So you get an advantage. It's almost like having an extra guy in the box or something like that. Or just someone that you really want to have as a legitimate last line of defense that only has to play, 10 yards off the line, 12 yards off the line. So, you can still stop them from getting maybe to the 35-yard line. I think that'd actually be a really interesting kind of proposition for teams. But it's probably going to be something to watch more in 2025. But I would watch the breakdown, and I'll look at the numbers when they come in. I would look at the breakdown of undrafteds, because a lot of what you see in undrafteds a lot of times are players that teams look at as being capable of playing special teams. And if they happen to be, contributors in the regular game as well, that's a bonus. But, excuse me, you look on that, those coverage teams or whatever for a lot of guys, and now the rules are changing, and that might change the mix of, picking up some of these certain positions here as they get a little more into it. But I think that'll be interesting. So I don't know if I'm in favor of it yet, but I think it's kind of different to consider and see. All right, let's get into our questions here. Let me just check my email real quick. I don't anticipate anything because I know there wasn't anything earlier. And like I said, it's been so long, I just can't dig through all the emails to look it up. I should go over the 50% rule, because people have asked a lot about that, because more and more teams are using it. Yeah, so there's nothing here that I see. Yeah, so if you emailed me something in the last month that you'd like to have answered, email it to me, the week of the 15th? Something like that. let me get home here. Yeah, the week of the 15th. Email me again that week, and then I'll get it onto the podcast when I come back. Some people have asked about this 50% rule, so I'll mention that really. There's a couple of teams that are doing it intentionally. They haven't done it for years. Usually it's the last time it really happened was by mistake, and now teams are doing it purposely. Basically what the league does is they look at contracts and, the difference in salary between year 1 and year 2 can't be a difference of more than 50%. What they don't want you to do is do a contract to where you have a bunch of cap room. Remember Jimmy Garoppolo with San Francisco, and he signed a contract that was $28 million or so a year, and I think in the first year his salary cap hit was like $38 or $39 million. They don't want you to basically sign a player to a big expensive contract, have a year that you're basically punting on the season, take a salary cap charge of $50 million, and then in the next year have a salary cap charge of $2 million. Basically they say if you take a charge of $50 million and you want it to be a $50 million charge, you have to have him the following year on the roster with a cap charge of at least $25.1 million, something like that. It's called the 50% down rule. Now, it probably holds more weight in the old CBA where there were salary cap spending limits versus cash spending limits, and I think that was probably more the design of the rule, that they didn't want you to inflate players' cap numbers to reach this, specifically through the use of incentives, where teams were utilizing incentives to carry over salary cap money, and potentially meet salary cap minimum spending, which you weren't really meeting it, you were just making it be accounted for. One of the, who was the contract? Evan White? Yeah. So this is someone that it applied to. A lot of people ask me about this. So, people say, well, these numbers don't make sense. He's got a 2.25 base, but a 1.7 cap number. Like, how does any of that make sense? So, the way the NFL calculates this, and I might not actually calculate this right here because I'm just going to go kind of off of memory. I'm not 100% sure as to what his numbers are, but basically what you've got here is in 2024 he has a 2.25 base. Okay, he's got per game bonuses that are $500,000. I don't know. And he's got $250 as a workout. Now, it's only the LTBE portion that matters here. It's all scratch work. White played 14 games last year. All right. So his LTBE is 411,765. And he also has a signing bonus, $1 million. So that's divided by 4. By 5. So what you do is you look at the second year. Now, the second year of his contract is going to have a paragraph 5 salary that is the minimum. I think that's 1,255. Let me see here. So we go into 2025. Oh, how many years has he been in the league? I'll see if I can actually get these numbers right. All right, so he should be a 117. Excuse me. I think that's what he's at. So when we calculate the numbers here, hopefully these will work out. Now they'll match what's on on here. So you add these up. So his cap hit with the contract written as is for this year would be $3.11 million. Okay, but the next year after that, which is a void year, but it has a dummy salary of 1.17 and the $200,000 in signing bonus proration. You know, the difference is 1.74 million. You know, and he needs to have a cap number of at least 1.55. So basically, if the Eagles gave him a dummy salary of like 1.5 million, it wouldn't trigger the rule, but they didn't. So this triggers this in theory, which is basically that the difference should be treated as a signing bonus. So you get into this, and you've got the 3.11 versus 1.37. So we get a other amount treated as signing bonus of 1.741765 million. So we divide that now by 5. We'll see if I get this right here. So it would be the 200,000 from his other bonus plus 348,353. I'll see if I guessed right on the numbers. 548,353. Yeah, and that's what I have there is 548,353. So his new proration is going to be 548,353 because that's what the 50% down rule encompasses. So what that does is that basically takes his workout bonus, turns it to nothing. His per game bonus turns it to nothing. And his paragraph 5 salary, his base salary changes from 2.25 to the 1.17. And that's where you come up with this number of 1.71 million is the cap charge. And then you deal with all this other stuff afterwards. So, you know, this is a unique way to prorate money in a contract. You know, he's got 2.19 dead. That sound right? Yep. So it's a unique way to prorate money in a contract without actually paying it as a signing bonus. Now, what's the purpose of doing that? Well, the purpose of doing that is a couple of different reasons, but the main reason is, you know, if you trade the player, even though all this prorated money exists in the contract where you've lowered that salary cap charge, you know, the other team is still taking on that 2.25 base. The other team is taking on that $500,000 in per game bonuses. You know, so you get credits for that the following year. Basically what it is, you get relief on it. Same thing if you release the player, if the salary is not guaranteed, and his might be guaranteed. Yeah, his is guaranteed. But, you know, if it wasn't guaranteed and you release the player, you know, you can still get that salary cap relief and release the player without actually owing him the money where you would owe it if you actually paid it as a signing bonus. So that's the reason behind these deals. It's very rarely used. It is used by the Eagles. It's used by the Lions. The Jets have tinkered with it purposely. Yeah, I'm not sure. Buccaneers have used it. That's probably it. There might be one other team that's used it, and I'm just not thinking about it. But for years, it really wasn't used. I remember the Colts used it in 2013 or 2014. I mentioned it in the Crunching Numbers book, I think. And it was clearly a mistake by the Colts. They didn't know the rule. That was very clear. I think that their general manager at the time maybe was not aware of the rule and got hit on it. But this is intentional, where it's being done this way, you know, to do that. So there's a couple of ones like this. So, you know, when you see on the other site that copies the numbers, and they'll tell you that there's some wacky signing bonus in there. There ain't no wacky signing bonus. It's a 50% down rule. I'm just presenting the contracts in the way that they kind of are, just so it helps me with valuation on the trade possibilities and other stuff. But I do know it throws the calculators off if you're looking to create more cap room and stuff like that. But, you I just thought I would mention that because I know I've gotten a lot of questions on it. But that's what the 50% down rule is. So if you're following along on YouTube, you can see that. But basically, it's you take the cap number from year 1, subtract from it the cap number in year 2. If the difference is more than 50%, well, then that entire difference is turned into a signing bonus. And, the base salary basically becomes the base salary that exists in the following year. And the rest is converted to a signing bonus. Now, the non-likely to be earned portion of those per-game bonuses or any incentives, those accrue as normal. The 50% rule isn't calculated at that point because it's basically incentivized. So if he gets those extra 3 games, I think it was, you take the 500,000 times 3 divided by 17. Whoops, I put it in 5 million in my Excel here. 500,000. So it's an extra 88,235. So his cap number can reach as high as 1.806 million. But that's the reason why teams kind of do that. It's just a way to manipulate the numbers while maintaining their trade window possibilities, or if there's no guarantees backing up the P5s, their abilities to release the player and kind of get that salary cap relief during this period of the season. All right, let's pull up Twitter. Should I put in a last call for questions? Sure, why not, right? Let's see. All right, so we'll put in a last call there. All right, so let's go to a profile. I tell you, this my edits thing. So I subscribe to Twitter. I know most people don't. I just thought it was some of the features in my mind. I think I talked about this a long time ago. The 2-factor authentication. Though Troy taught me a way to kind of get around that. But the 2-factor authentication was really the big thing for me. Only because my Twitter account years and years and years ago on this got hacked. I just remember I was tweeting out apparently a bunch of stuff in Arabic, and luckily Twitter was pretty, even then, I guess pretty archaic in the fact that even though the password had changed and the account ownership at that point was hacked and changed, as long as I didn't log out from a browser, it automatically logged me in, so I was able to regain my my stuff just because of that. And I'm sure it doesn't work that way anymore, even though Twitter has messed up a bunch of stuff. But that edit function that just mentioned there, I swear there's times where it works, times where it doesn't. And this is from the other day, Mike Dana. He got a great deal. I'm sure that was offered to him in March, and they were holding off because they needed to trade Snead. More likely it was a combination of things. But I think they just ended up honoring the contract offer that they had on the table for him. All right, let's take a look here. Probably should just go get another beer now, but we'll go. David, Bills hater here. My biggest worry is that they're going after Ayuk. Is there a way they could fit him under their cap? I'm sure they could fit him. Let's see what they're at. Whoops. I gotta fix that. All right. So the Bills at the moment have where are they? $3.5 million in cap room. But I don't think they went full all in on Josh Allen. I know, I'm wrong. They did. Von Miller probably already earned his roster bonus. You could save a little with Milano, but not very much. Not much with Dawkins, not much with Oliver. Most of these guys are at the minimum. No, I don't see it. What's Ayuk's cap number this year? So I don't see it. To do a trade to bring Ayuk in, they would probably have to get him to renegotiate his deal with San Francisco to have like a $2 million salary this year, and then go in after the fact and do an extension with them. It would be a lot of moving parts to do something like that. You know, you'd have to have void year salaries of like $100 million. That allows you to still comply with certain salary cap rules, unless the league has put a kibosh on that I don't know about. That's a tough one. I don't think they could do it. I can never say never, but I don't think they could do it. If O-line is to pick a 10, which one do you think the Jets will call? I have no idea. I just don't know the players. But I do think O-line is to pick a 10. I know there's some that, that are saying wide receiver. I think the Jets are locked in on a tackle. But I don't know who that player will be. Adam, describe a perfect day to you. I have none, but I love your work. I don't really have a perfect day either. I don't know what my perfect day would be. But I'm sure next Thursday we'll be at Epcot. We'll have the perfect day there. I will give you some play-by-play on whatever I'm drinking at Epcot. I'll ask for some advice. I may also have a trip to Disney Springs at one of the places there. I'll post a beer menu. Those are my perfect days. It's, when you get into the deep in the days, there's not much you're going to have that's too good. Ray Finkel, where do the Panthers sit in cap space after the Derek Brown extension? I don't have details on that contract yet. Less Pro Football Talk put him out, and I don't know about it. I don't have them yet, so I don't know where they stand with it. So, maybe in 2 weeks. Well, sure, in a week I'll have the numbers, but at the moment I don't know. Andy, could the Texans make Diggs June 1 next year to spread the cap hit out, or is that not an option? I don't know. If they have that option there to do it, it would already be in the contract. Now, it probably would make sense, since he does not qualify for the compensatory pick process anyway. It would probably make sense for them to do that, unless they really did think that there's a possibility that they could extend him next year. And, once you dangle the June 1 out there, that kind of limits that. It doesn't mean you can't do it, but it kind of limits it. In theory, that could be a somewhat logical reason to why they gave him a raise. But I don't 100% know that yet, that they can't do it. My assumption right now is no, but I don't know that for certain. Kev, how do the Eagles keep abusing the cap to where they always have space and always sign players? I need answers. Eagles have a very smart front office. They have a lot of good people there. They have a lot of forward-thinking people, and they don't think with a short term. They always think with a long term. Now, there's a lot more job security in Philadelphia than there is in, most other teams. There's other teams that have, you go work in Dallas, you've got job security, right? It's basically a family business. And a lot of people who have been there for a long time. I know not the coaches, but front office people have been there a long time. Jerry, I think, is very good that way. The Eagles have done a very good job of exploiting relationships with agents, working through contract extensions when you've got multiple years left on contracts, again, at smart positions to do it with, right? They just did their, I don't have the details of it, but they just did their extension with the left tackle, which makes a lot of sense that, you're not really guaranteeing him a lot of new money Because basically you're saying, all right, well, we'll take your salary this year that wasn't guaranteed and next year that wasn't guaranteed. We weren't going to cut you anyway. We're going to guarantee it. So that's one of the things they do. So they utilize that June 1 rule. They're very creative with their contracts. The Eagles are a first mover when it comes to anything and everything. When you get into these June 1 rules kind of things, the Eagles were at the forefront of it. When you get into ways to manipulate the comp pick process to the point where the NFL changed the rules, the Eagles are at the forefront of it. When you get into the stuff that I was mentioning about that 50% down rule to maintain your flexibility, the Eagles are at the forefront of it. When you get into using these option bonuses where you maintain your ability to trade the player, even though you're keeping the cap numbers low, without actually having to pay the salary, the Eagles are at the forefront of it. When you get into doing contracts that at times I will say they don't make sense, the Eagles are kind of at the forefront of it in the sense that what they're doing is the Eagles are getting ahead of the system. Now, it doesn't always work. All right, there's been some times where, the one that stands out to me, I think, was Brooks, where the assumption was, they could push the guard position and he was still going to be good, and the guard position did not rise at that point in time, and he was hurt. But in general, the Eagles have done a very good job of going out there and saying, okay, look, yeah, is this player, and whoever the player might be, whatever it is, let's just say generic cornerback, is this player worth $17 million a year? Probably not. But if we sign him for $17 a year, 5 other teams are now going to have to sign their cornerbacks for $17.5, $18, $18.5, $19 a year. $19.5. I think I'm forgetting one more. So in a sense, what they're doing is they're creating a market. They're creating the market. They're getting ahead of it. So, you go back to, the A.J. Brown deal. I'll use that as an example. So A.J. Brown at 25. Now, his real number is lower than that. I'm going to say A.J. Brown is probably 24. Because that last year has a balloon salary, and then you have the trade issue with it as well, where again you value it lower. But let's just call AJ Brown at 25. AJ Brown at 25 directly causes Cooper Kupp at 26.7. It directly causes DK Metcalf at 24, Debo at 23.85, Pittman at 23.3, McLaurin at 23.2. Now, AJ Brown is higher than that. But they did bring in a year with him where he was at like $5 million or 4 point something. Excuse me. The final year of that deal, and again, where you get into those discussions where you don't really consider yourself when you trade for the player. You don't really consider that old money. You consider that part of the contract. So you're like, okay, yeah, new money wise, he's at 25. Realistically, to us, he's probably at like 20. And, that pushes the market. So where, his 20 is like not well under, but is going to be under, the Ridleys, the McLaurins, the Debos, and the Metcalfs, somewhat there. So at the very least, even if you're pushing the numbers, you're just going to be in line with the market because you're pulling the whole market up with you. So I think the Eagles game the system. They want to get ahead of the market and create it versus being a follower of it. So they will never have, I don't think at least, a situation where, let's say they had a top pass rusher to where the market is 28 and they've got to go to 34. All right. They will create a market where they'll give a guy, whomever it is, let's just say it was at edge, they'll give a guy 37 and say, okay, that 37 is going to last for 3 months or at the most a year. And then you're going to have a bunch of guys over. Like Jalen Hurts would be an example of that. Like Jalen Hurts is not the best quarterback in the NFL. Probably not even close to it. But, the market at the time, you had a couple guys right around 50. I think it was $49 million or so for Russell Wilson, $50 million probably for Aaron Rodgers. I don't think he'd been traded yet. Maybe he was. So, they go to 51 with Jalen Hurts, knowing, okay, if we go to 51 for Jalen Hurts, well, we know for a fact that Burrow, Herbert, and Jackson are all signing new deals. So it's like, okay, we're going to go to 51, but those guys are going to have to deal with players at 52, 52.5, and 55. And, we can, go down and we're to say like, well, all we're doing is setting baselines for Trevor Lawrence. And, Patrick Mahomes wanted a raise. Josh Allen gets a raise. All we're doing is setting baselines now for, Zach Wilson. No, I'm kidding. But the next group of guys to get contracts who are good, all we're doing is setting a baseline for them. So, we're looking at something to where our player, we gave him number 1 money. Realistically, it's number 5, number 6, number 7. Whereas if you wait on that, you become the player or the team that's in the situation where you've got to deal with, okay, now we've got to actually argue you're not as good as Lamar Jackson, you're not as good as Justin Herbert, you're not as good as Joe Burrow. Now, is Jalen Hurts as good as those guys? No, he's not. But you don't even have to get into that argument because you're working on the market as it exists and you're just like, okay, yeah, you're the best player, 51.5. Okay, great. I'll sign on the dotted line. So instead of a negative discussion, it's a very positive discussion. And you're doing that knowing that you're going to have these players come over him. And it sets a stage now because, these guys are all first-round picks, former MVP, whatever. You're setting a stage where you're taking a second-round pick at that number. So, again, you're creating a scenario where, when somebody else comes in, whoever it might be, there's not a lot of great young quarterbacks right now, but whomever it might be, has a easier path to jumping over you, when you do the deal. JP, what are the chances the Jets open camp with Wilson as their number 3 quarterback while hoping for quarterback injury on another team? Could this strategy also spill in the regular season? It all depends on what Douglas's and Saleh, I don't know who's, I wouldn't call it a power struggle, but Saleh is definitely more anti-Wilson than Joe Douglas. But I think it depends on how much stomach they have to deal with him being there. And, at this point, it is probably not fair to him. I don't think Wilson's a good quarterback. I think he's terrible. I don't think there's any salvaging him. But, he has gone through a lot of negative stuff the last year or two. But, I think Douglas has been very worried about doing what he considers to be a bad trade. And in general, he's been very good with his trades. The problem is Wilson's awful. And you look at the return these guys are getting for players who are better than Wilson, it's not good. And, I think that becomes a difficult sell sometimes to ownership. And, Woody even mentioned it like, well, if we don't get what we think he's worth, we're just going to hold on to him. So I think that there's a, if I had to put a number on it right now, I'd say like a 70% chance because I don't think that the Jets are going to be like, yeah, a 6th-round pick in 2026 is good. So I think they would at least get to the point to where instead of having to go through the process of having me or Samini or, Brian Costello or whomever's covering the team say, yeah, the Jets had to renegotiate his contract and pick up the $4 million roster bonus the Jets will actually pay that roster bonus in early August and then make the trade in September or something like that, late August, where, they get next to nothing for him. But instead of making a big deal that they paid the roster bonus, it's almost like, well, they had to pay it because it just, the date passed and that was the best they could do. Connor, when should the Jaguars sign Trevor Lawrence to an extension and what should it be? He's a real interesting, player. So, Trevor Lawrence, in terms of, what should it be? I mean, it's over Hurts. I mean, you look back at Kyler Murray. I'm pretty sure Kyler Murray set the record at the time, or was he under Aaron Rodgers? I can't remember. I don't remember if he was behind Aaron or not. He might have been behind Aaron. In any event, he was. He was. Let me look it up. Let me look up the dates on that. He had to be. He had to be before him, right? All right. So Kyler was 7/22/22. No, maybe not. Aaron was 3/14/22. So all right. So he was before Aaron. I'm sorry, he was after Aaron. So they basically discounted that and they gave him top of the line. It's a tough one. My gut feeling on it is that he would be, so Burrow's so much over Herbert, but my gut feeling would be, and I think I have an error there with Burrow. Oh no, because he got the he got a $40 million signing bonus, right? Or was it a roster bonus? It was a roster bonus that they prorated. My gut feeling, I'm going to say like 56 or 55, 55-1, 55-2, just right over Burrow. I think that's just the way this stuff goes. So, look, here's what I think on Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence is a very good quarterback. I don't know if Trevor Lawrence has that killer instinct some of these other guys have. He might not. I don't really know. I think he is underrated by some, overrated by others. I think categorizing him with Daniel Jones is ridiculous. He's on a team that has been run like garbage for 2 decades. They are where they are in large part because of him, but at the same time, there are still some things he does that are very head-scratching. Just watching him, little bits and pieces that I've seen of him. Where he just does some stuff that's odd. I don't know if some of that is coaching. I don't know if some of that is on him. I'm not really sure. I'm gonna say something a little bit odd here. If I were Jacksonville, going back to that part that I mentioned where I said that that second quarterback contract is kind of more risky sometimes than the third. I would not be worried about going the franchise tag route with him. When you have the right quarterback, I don't care where the market gets to. If Dak Prescott gets to 60 and I got to spend 61 on Lawrence instead of 56, I don't care. All right? Because it doesn't matter. The position is that important to where if I have a guy who's good, realistically, based on where the market is now at, $50 million a year, you could spend $65 to $70 million a year on a quarterback if it's the right quarterback, and it won't hurt you. It's only going to hurt you against those teams that have the guy like a CJ Stroud who's playing for pennies on the dollar, who looks like they're a superstar. All right. Otherwise, it doesn't really hurt you. And, where you get into that same discussion I was at with the Eagles, even if you paid the guy $65 million, there's going to be 3 quarterbacks making 66, 67, 68 within, a year or two. I know Lamar Jackson is a unique kind of quarterback. But the fact that no teams made an offer on him, I would just put my chances out there that no team is going to make an offer on Trevor Lawrence. So if I was Jacksonville, I think I would go that franchise tag route. Maybe even the exclusive franchise tag route. Lawrence is under contract for 2 more years, right? Because they'll pick up the option. 74, 68, 63, 63, 63. I mean, you'd be looking on the exclusive number. Well, no, Aaron Rodgers won't count. Well, Derek Carr will be cut. Daniel Jones will be cut. Some of these numbers will be down. Yeah, you'd probably be looking at like a $55 million cap hit. No. Yeah, probably by the time some of these numbers get knocked down. Maybe a little bit higher. Maybe $60 million cap hit. If you had to go even the exclusive route. But after seeing the Lamar Jackson thing play out, and I do think Trevor Lawrence would probably get more action, but as long as my salary cap is in order to where I know I can match whatever offer sheet exists, I think I'd go the franchise tag route with him. And just make sure. I would just want to be 150% certain, that he's the guy. Because it's not, the numbers, they don't increase that much year over year, to where it's a problem. And whether I have him at 55, 60, or 65, it doesn't make a difference. But what I don't want to have is I don't want to have a player at, 55 and then, say, man, I should be getting someone else, like where the Giants are with Daniel Jones. And again, that's not to compare the two players and say he's like Daniel Jones. But when you get to a salary level of $60 million, maybe you do look at him like a Daniel Jones at 40. So I would wait. I don't think there's any rush for them. And I think the way Lamar Jackson's thing went, I think you can say, well, you know what? Maybe we can play it out as long as we got the salary cap room to manipulate or match whatever contract comes in. All right, let's take a look here. Next questions. Oops, that's the wrong mouse there. Krill, where did the Diggs money go, and why would Houston give up that kind of capital for 1 year rental, as well as potentially eat some of the money? What do the void years look like? So I went over the void years before for the way they do that. So at the moment, it's about 16 million dead. To get his cap number pretty low this year. This opener stinks. Basically they put all his money in a signing bonus, and after giving him that raise, and decided to do things that way. All right, let's see. Oh wait, hold on. I have a text here. I'm sure this is Megan. Sami Zayn won, I think. I don't even know what that means. So I'm guessing Sami Zayn won, but I guess she's following along on Instagram or something like that. Some people must have said something. So, I guess good for Sami Zayn. Mark, predictability of draft picks by position. I don't think there's really a lot of predictability in that. I think you can look at those, the different kind of boards that are out there, and, you get some ideas. I mean, you can look historically, first round picks, quarterbacks, edge, left tackles, corners, but I don't think that you can necessarily say it's 100% predictable. There's a lot of teams that don't go for premium positions. Just kind of varies year over year. As to what things do. Now, I will say that I think when you get into the playoff teams, I think there's a lot less thought process that goes into the draft picks. I think teams start focusing much more on thinking that the picks are luxury picks versus just, any kind of long-term vision. And I think that's a mistake. And I think in general, that's just a big mistake overall in the way that teams approach the draft. Simply because, with free agency, something that's not a need today is a need 2 years from now. And I don't even care if you have a young player under contract. Like, I'll use Jets as an example, right? The coach and the general manager are on the hottest of hot seats. There is no guarantee that Garrett Wilson is on the Jets in 2025. There's no guarantee Sauce Gardner is on the Jets in 2025. If it's a new general manager coming in, I would actually put the odds more in the favor of at least one of those guys not being on the Jets in 2025. So, a position that is not a need today is absolutely a need tomorrow. And I think that's a mistake that, too many teams, make when they approach the draft when they're coming from a position of strength as a playoff team. I think that's a big mistake as to, kind of what they do. But, I mean, in general, you can look at those couple of premium positions and go, they're probably the positions that are going to go in like the top 15 of the draft. Zay, do you think the Steelers are going to take a similar contract approach to Justin Fields as the Packers did with Jordan Love? And how many games do you think Fields will start this year, if any? I don't think Justin Fields is going to be an option to start until at least week 7. And I don't even know if he's going to be an option to start, at all this year. It's not that he might not be better than Russell Wilson. It's just that Mike Tomlin's a very good coach. They always get a lot out of their defense, and they find a way to compete. And if competing means Russell Wilson handing the ball off to Najee Harris and throwing 5-yard passes to Pickens and him doing something with them and, them winning games 20-17, I don't know if they will go in there and make a change at quarterback, even though that quarterback situation might be of higher potential, if they go out there and, make that change. Given that the market for Fields was so soft, I don't think there's any rush for them to do a deal with him. If he sits on the bench all year, there's no reason why they can't come back in there and sign him to a contract the next year for $5 million. I mean, you basically entered Jameis Winston territory. Jameis, when he went to New Orleans, let's look up his contract history. So he went to New Orleans after Tampa, at 1.1. The next year he's at 5.5. his jump up was 2022 at 14 because they lost their quarterback and they didn't have other options necessarily on the table. So they paid up, to do that because they missed out on Deshaun, and they regretted it. This was a regrettable contract, and they brought him down in salary the next year because he only had 5.8. Whoops. I don't know what I just did there. Just screwed up my size of the recording. He went from a 5.8 guarantee to, the next year they gave him 4.1. They actually brought that vested salary. It wasn't a 5.8 full, it was 5.8 injury. They brought that down to 4.1. The Saints are very good at doing that kind of stuff. And this year he's at 4 with the Browns. So, that's really where you're at with Justin Fields. So, I think you look at it and you're just like, look, if he doesn't play, we'll sign him for 4. We'll sign him for 5. So I think that's the deal. Terush, if I pronounce that right. What's the tight end market? Seems like a lot of depth. Unproven guys got paid pretty handsomely. Brock Wright, LA contracts. So, the tight end market is always very weird. The teams just kind of look at a lot of guys in the mid-range and say, whatever, we'll pay up. It's one of those deals where because the money is not high really anywhere in it, even at the top end of it, you don't get into contract disputes over it. You just kind of go with the theory of they want it. It's not that much in the grand scheme of things. We'll do it. It's the same reason why a bunch of teams sign kickers for $4 or $5 million a year. It's the same reason why a bunch of teams, it doesn't, the money's so low, but, long snappers at like 1.5 a year. Even punters at like $2 million a year. But I would equate it to like kickers at like $5 million a year or something like that. That it's just like, whatever. It's not that much money, so we'll just do it. TLC, with the Chiefs receiving an F- owner grade from the NFLPA, how much impact do you think it has in retaining players and attracting free agents versus a team with a higher organizational grade? 0. I think one of the big problems with the NFLPA grading system is you're not separating players who have actually played for other teams. So in a lot of cases, it's like, all right, how does it compare to the college facility of the team that doesn't pay the players anything or pay anybody anything, but, sinks the money into this for recruiting processes to, have a cool gym, workout facilities, stadium, all that stuff. So we're not really separating players who've been in multiple stops versus players who are rookies. That's one of the things. The second thing is, for the most part, if you're a football player and I offer you $2 million and I've got a lousy facility and the other team with the better facility offers you 1.5, you're going to take $2 million deal. Doesn't matter what the facility is. You are taking the most money available in 99% of the time. And with a team like Chiefs, you get an opportunity to compete for a championship every year. You might even take less money to go to Kansas City for that. So, I think those grades are good in the sense that if the owners are truly unaware that their facilities are crap, maybe it gives them an incentive to invest more. But I think most of the time they will just do that. Like, you do that interview and you say, oh, we really had no idea, so we're so glad we know now. And, yeah, we're investing another $30 million now in our training facility. They probably had that earmark long before. And you just announce it now because you got that little bit of negative publicity that came from the PA thing, but that money was always set aside for it at some point in time. It's just that that little study is maybe what pushes you in that direction. George, the Lions have been using a 50% down rule with several recent contracts. They could have done the same cap manipulation with signing bonus or guaranteed roster bonuses. Why do it that way? Do other teams use this cap strategy? So, kind of mentioned that a little bit before. The benefit of doing it that way, so for example, Carlton Davis, they could still trade him. And, you get that salary cap benefit now. Do they need it? Probably not. Let me see what their cap room is. Pretty sure their cap is still pretty healthy. They're still top 10, in the league. But, you get that benefit. But in their case, with a guy like Davis or something like that, right? His base is probably like $8 million. I think that's what it is. Carlton Davis. That's probably the biggest guy they've used it with. So $8 million. So let's say that the Lions have a bad year. Davis is having a so-so year or whatever, and you want to trade him again. He's not fitting in. You get that benefit of basically taking $7 million or so of that base salary and prorating it, and you can trade him halfway through the year. You only have to pay $4 million of it. You got that prorated signing bonus in there, so you got this cap number benefit, and you're going to get a credit on your salary cap the next year, $4 million, to offset a lot of that dead money that comes from the 50% down rule. So that's really the reason why you're doing it, is you are maintaining that flexibility with being able to. You're not going to release in that case. You're not going to release the player. There might be some lower level guys you might do that with, but mainly it's having that ability. Excuse me, to potentially trade that player. And really that's the main reason why you're going to do that. Flip, do you have a chart for year-by-year growth? Wondering if some of the trends this year are one-offs. Like I said, I usually do that with the consulting stuff, so I don't put that online. Maybe one of these days I'll talk with Nick. We can maybe try to put something together for that in the premium section or something. But I'll do an article on it or a podcast on it at some point this year where we do look at that, longer span to look at that. Mike, can you explain how the LTB and NLTB, so that's likely to be earned or not likely to be earned incentives, work, and how they affect cap space for the year the player is playing on the incentives and the year after, where the incentives affect next year's cap space? So a likely to be earned incentive is based on what the player and or team did the prior year. So let's say you have a running back and the incentive is they get $500,000 if they have 1,000 yards. If the player had 1,000 yards in 2023, that number, what I just say it was, 500,000, would count on this year's salary cap, the $500,000. If they only gain 990 yards in 2024, the team would get a $500,000 credit in 2025 because the player didn't earn it. Similarly, if the player has a $500,000 incentive for 1,000 rushing yards in 2024, and in 2023 they only had 700 yards, it would not count on the cap. Let's say they had 1,050 yards in 2024. The team on the cap in 2025 would have an adjustment that was negative $500,000. So basically, the incentives are a way to, get a deal done and kind of, defer either the cap charges or a cap credit to 2025. And typically it depends on what your cap situation is like. If your cap situation is really good this year, you don't mind having them likely to be earned and getting that credit the next year, or not having to take a charge for them the following year. If you are a team that's very tight against the cap, usually you come up with a way to make them not likely to be earned. So, for example, the Saints, who are perennially against the salary cap, will actually put clauses in their contract. Now, this goes back old school. This is what teams used to do all the time with their contracts. You will put a clause in that says, if this is likely to be earned, the incentive will automatically change to be not likely to be earned. Meaning, if the 1,000 yards rushing is the incentive, and let's say the player gains exactly 1,000 yards, or let's say he gains 1,050 yards, the incentive the following year becomes 1,051 yards. Contractually, it's in there automatically because you're making it not likely to be earned. If you're a team that's hard up against the cap, you will put a clause in there that says, okay, the player earns $1 million if he plays 50% of the snaps. And let's say the prior year he played 60% of the snaps. You'll put a clause in there that says he gets $1 million if the player plays 60% of the snaps or 50% of the snaps, and the team improves its ranking in whatever you want it to be in. You'll choose the easiest threshold based on what you did the prior year. So if you were a team like the Jets that had Zach Wilson playing quarterback, you'll do something like, okay, 50% of the snaps, and the team improves in completion percentage, the team improves in touchdown passes, or the team improves in yards per pass attempt. Something like that, where because it's a team improvement category, it's not likely to be earned because you don't know if a team will improve. But you do them in categories to where it's almost impossible to not improve in the category. Like, you can't be worse than Zach Wilson at quarterback. So it all depends on what your cap situation is like, as to how you try to categorize them. But basically, it's just, do you take a charge this year, or do you take something the following year? That's basically what you're looking at. Proud Black Matt, can you talk a little bit about the 90% cap 3-year spending cycle as we begin a new one? How might a rebuilding team like the Patriots approach it? 90% cap spending is, quite frankly, it's useless. No team has even been remotely close to that limit. I think basically what you're doing, regardless of where you're at, you're just spending whatever you want. Because the thing is, it's not even a 3-year limit. Because your 3 years, you've got your 2024 spending. If you're a bad football team like the Patriots were, all your spending begins after the start of the league year, right? Starts in March, whatever it was, 15th, 13th, which all counts towards 2024. So you've got your spending in 24, 25, 26, and let's say you're still short. Well, any player you have under contract in 2027, you can restructure that deal in February. It will still count towards that 3-year spending period. So it's just a meaningless rule. It's just in my mind, it's a whiff by the PA to be so focused on this 89 or 90% over such a short period of time. A long period of time, especially with the way the rules are written, to where everything is based on the technical league year, which runs until mid-March of the following season, to where teams can just manipulate it. Just a bad job by the PA. Jake, Vikings signed Shaq Griffin to a CFA contract. Shaq was cut by the Texans mid-season, but his contract was claimed on waivers by the Panthers, who let his contract expire. This likely cost the Vikings a comp pick in the third. Is this true? Did the Vikings screw up? All right, let me see if that's even true. Let's see what Nick has here. Draft compensatory picks. So plenty of teams follow what we do. Now there were some weird things that went on with the comp picks this year. Nick picked up on it very quickly, and he was right about it. So we may have some adjustments we have to make this year, and we're trying to figure that out. But let's see, Minnesota. Let's see, NFC North. Should just jump to it. So at the moment, it really doesn't cost them anything. So unless he plays a lot, you have to play a hell of a lot. Or Darnold would have to play a lot. Griffin probably isn't going to cost them anything. Darnold might. But this is why you can't bank on these comp picks. Minnesota's got a lot of holes. They cannot... Okay, so you look at Minnesota's stuff that they have here. Minnesota can't go out there and not have a quarterback because they need to protect a third-round pick for Danielle Hunter. Maybe you can look at it and say, okay, they could have held off on one of these guys, but they have to go out there and produce a roster. So, yeah, I guess the Griffin thing is, Darnold would have dropped down to canceling out the 6th. I guess is how that would have worked. I'm not 100% sure on that. But you can't. It's very hard to run your entire team when you have a lot of holes on your team to all be based around what you're doing with compensatory picks. Unless you're just punting on free agency like the Cowboys do or the Ravens do many times, it's just that's just not the way to do this. So I wouldn't say the Vikings screwed up, even if that ends up being the end result of it. I don't think that means they screwed up. I just think it's more along the lines of us as fans or people talking about it that kind of overestimate, I think, the possibility of those comp picks. Instead of looking as a comp pick as likely, we should always look at a comp pick as something that's unlikely to be returned to us, and it's almost like a bonus if you get it. Michael, if you're the Jets and they take Bowers, what does he have to do just fine? Don't get me started on that. Even though you don't get bang for your buck on a rookie contract, even if he hits a ceiling. So, all right, if you draft a tight end, that high in the draft, he basically has to be one of the top 3 tight ends in the NFL. So, if his production warrants being like a, top 3 tight end, 1,100 receiving yards, he's on the field all the time, something like that, then it's worthwhile. It's like when you make those picks... This is the thing, like, people get annoyed with me for, saying the stuff about certain picks, certain positions that get selected. Sorry, I just took another beer break to go grab another one. So going back again to, to this, when you take these non-premium positions, it's just there's just no margin for error. You need the guy to basically be a top player at the position to justify that investment. With the other positions, it's very different. But, would it help a club more than picking a wide receiver? It turns into a number one, number two option. It might. But, the issue that exists with it is how many tight ends really do. There's very few. And then the other thing, and this is one of the things that would petrify me from a Jets perspective. Let's say that the Jets offensive coordinator or quarterback's coach, whomever's got more power at this point now, it's probably Hackett, Downing. Let's say they favor having a tight end being a productive part of the offense. I already know my whole coaching staff is on, the hot seat. And the odds are much more in the favor that the coaching staff is going to be fired probably mid-season versus, staying on the team. Even though I said I think the Jets right now look like a wild card team that's a one and done, and then it's really rebuilding again after that. When you get those players and you switch to a different offense, I have no guarantee that the offense that comes in is going to utilize a tight end. I know they will utilize a wide receiver, but I don't know if they will utilize a tight end. That's a very subjective position. So it leaves you no margin for error, and you need to know that the new regime that comes in has to be willing to utilize that position. So I wouldn't do it if I was the Jets, but see what happens. Curtis, when a team converts salary to a signing bonus, how do most teams schedule the payments? Is it done like a standard contract signing, or do they just pay it out weekly like salary? Majority of the time, it's just paid out weekly like salary. It's usually the conversion language that's in a contract is that we're going to pay it out the same as salary, or give or take a little bit. I mean, maybe there's some differences now, and I haven't paid enough attention to it because the salary is paid out over 36 versus 18 weeks. But I think it's the same. But typically, usually it reads that it's paid out the same as your paragraph 5 salary payments. It's not like you get a balloon payment, and then money afterwards. Dallas, how would you handle T. Higgins if you were running the Bengals? Assuming Cincinnati could get a pick in the 75 to 90 range, would you trade Higgins, play out the year, tag and trade in 2025? So I would play out the year and then deal with 2025 as it comes along. I'd probably tag him again. And, next year, trade him for probably whatever you can get. Again, it's not fair for the player, and it's the screw up of the system. But I think that's probably what I would do if I were the Bengals. Jake, how would you design a cash spending floor so that it had a real impact? Remove any restructuring loopholes. What would the minimum for an individual team? 95 over 2, 100 over 3. What about league-wide minimum? So, league-wide minimum, I don't really care so much about that. I think from a team-wide perspective, and I think I published this along with VJ a couple of years ago, I think 100% minimum is what you need to have any kind of bite at all. Like, there's only a handful of teams that are under 100%, and most teams are over 100. So it's almost like you need over 100% cash spending to have any real impact. But you could do it to where if you got rid of that loophole that I mentioned before, meaning, hello, Jacob. For what? All right. Jacob is getting headphones. Jacob took a nap before, so he's still awake, even though it's 11 o'clock at night. See how that goes tomorrow. So he, sorry. The way that I would look at it is, if you got rid of that loophole to where in 2027, we can still be spending money and have it account towards the 24 through 26 league years. That might do a little something. But I think realistically, you need to have the cash to cap be equal to 100% at a minimum. To have the spending really be meaningful. There are. I can't even say that there's any exceptions to that. I think that has to be the number. I think if we go back and we look at it, I think having the the spending really be tied to the cap probably makes a little bit more sense. Megan has just emailed me that it is final boss time, so I'm assuming that means The Rock is on his way out. I'm assuming she's watching somewhere online. To see. All right, let me check my email again here. I'll see if I got anything else in since I asked for final questions, and we did. All right, let's see, and then we'll go back to Twitter. So Max, how badly did the Cowboys screw up by letting Parsons, Lamb, and Prescott all come up for extensions at the same time? Parsons only just became extension eligible, but why on earth did they drag their feet with Dak or Lamb? So I don't know. Throw Parsons out, right? That he's just where he's at. Lamb, I guess they could have been a little bit more proactive with that. Where's he at? They could have been a little more proactive. I don't know. I don't look at them with him and say like they really screwed up. Obviously, I'm just looking at his yardage total: 935, 1100, 1359. They could have extended him, last year and maybe done a little something. But again, where you look at where those contracts are at the position, I don't think it's, that much going up, going down, that's changing one way or the other. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think when it comes to Dallas, I don't know where their heads are at the moment with Dak Prescott. My assumption is they're keeping him because they don't have another option, but I don't know that for certain. There is part of me that will say, let's say the Cowboys, I don't think this will happen, all right? But if we're just getting into hypotheticals and we're talking about how do they let this happen with all these contracts coming up, at the same time, Dallas didn't spend any money this offseason, so obviously they have a lot of money earmarked for extensions. I'll say this. If Dallas was to allow Dak Prescott to walk, and I don't think that's a crazy idea. I'm not saying they'll do it, right? But just one of those things I mentioned before, like if you haven't won with Prescott up to this point, what makes you think you're going to win with him, at 60, like even more money beyond this point? I think one of the things, if you're Dallas, that you can kind of look at is saying, and I just realized looking at the recording time on this might be the longest podcast of all time. All time. But, I don't know. Part of me says that Dallas looks at this and says, okay, if we can't get a deal that we like with Prescott in the offseason, we can come into this next year extending Micah Parsons February, March, whatever, tagging and re-signing or just re-signing, even if it's this year, CeeDee Lamb, and trying to kind of, make that look very positive in the eyes of the fans. Like, we kept our young pass rusher, we kept our young wide receiver, but we're not winning with our quarterback, so we've decided to move on, phase. So part of me thinks that some of the delay, at least in the CeeDee Lamb thing, is almost like this is like the nice letdown, if you don't extend Dak Prescott. So I'm not saying they won't, just that, maybe that's a possibility. All right, Jason sends a question. NFLPA website has a different cap space number for most teams compared to OTC. What types of information do they have that you do not? I'm sure the actual number that is real is from the management council. Are you generally close most of the year? Do you get copies of actual contracts? So I'd have to look at the PA. So there's a couple of minor differences. So as far as I know, the PA has not accrued the workout minimum this year, which is close to $1 million. It's like 9,027 or 9,072. They're not including that in there. So every team that we have is going to be close to $1 million off from the PA's numbers. The second thing is, just like we do, we make mistakes sometimes. PA, I think, is a little bit more prone to mistakes with certain things when it comes to contracts. But they do and are always going to have better information than we do. As for getting contracts, we do get actual contracts that we do look through. That's one of the reasons why we do get, incentives much quicker than really the league does. Also definitely quicker than the PA does. As well as adjustments, if I put them in there. Last year I did not. I didn't put adjustment possibilities in there, but or estimates in there. But yeah, we do get all that stuff. But there are things that are gonna differ. I would say in 90% of the situations, if I wanted to look at the exact number, I would trust the PA's number over what we have. I'd also say in most of the cases, we're probably within a couple 100,000. But I know for a fact this year they do not have that workout number in there. So that's going to make their numbers invalid until July or August. But they will have, injury settlements and stuff like that. I don't get that stuff. In some cases I do, but in a lot of cases I do not. There's just minor mistakes I know the PA's made in the past. Like, they'll put players on the wrong team, and I'm sure we do that at times too. We probably pick up on it a little bit quicker, but I would just say that after that workout period, July, August time frame, I would say the PA's number is probably going to be more accurate. I think right now, we're actually more accurate, than the Players Association is when it comes to the numbers. During free agency period, we're always going to be more accurate, only because we're getting terms of contracts and we're adding them in. Even though those terms change from time to time, we're putting them in there. The PA is not putting them in until the contract becomes official, which sometimes can be 2, 3, 4 weeks before that's the case. All right, let's see. So we've moved on, by the way. We've finished our Mad Elf 6-pack. So we have some 2 Xmas holdovers here. These are very good. Excellent. All right. Oof. We've still got a lot of questions. Yeah, this is going to set a record here. Folks, if you've actually made it to the almost 3-hour mark, and I'm going to guess this is going to go on for 3.5 hours, I give you credit. I'm amazed I made it this far. But we've still got a couple more of these upstairs, so keep going. Zach, if New Orleans finally decides to take their medicine and clean up their cap situation, how long will it take? Probably 2 years. I don't think they can do that. I think New Orleans missed that. They missed that boat like 2 years ago. So they're at the point where there's not really an option to take cap medicine. It's more the option of get a year older, keep the same roster. Get a year older, keep the same roster. Then turn it over and have a bunch of people say, see, we told you the cap was meaningless, when it's like you had a crappy roster for 4 years because of the cap. But whatever. D's, does Diggs have to consent to his contract being voided? Yes, but there's no reason he would say no to that. They gave him a raise to do it. So, sure. Jason, what do you think an extension for Goff would look like? That's a great question. So, if I am the Lions, I'm looking at Stafford. So Stafford is $40 million a year, $120 guaranteed, $63 full. Stafford came off a Super Bowl appearance, so and obviously that's Goff's old team. I'm looking at that as kind of the mark that I'm willing to go to. Now, you may go up a little bit based on the cap rising from, where it was in 2022, even though if you want to get into, which team was more successful, the Rams obviously hit the, kind of the higher point, whereas the Lions have been good for 2 years, but, obviously didn't advance to that Super Bowl level. But, I think that's kind of the range. I mean, I'm sure from Goff's perspective, you're probably looking at Kirk Cousins at 45, and 40 to 45. A couple years later, it's not that far out of the realm of possibilities. But I think if I'm the Lions, I'm looking at Stafford, and then I would be looking at Cousins as probably my kind of top, top meaning, Cousins at 45. Okay, I'll go to 45.5, something like that. But I think that's probably the range that you're looking at, is between those two guys. Personally, I would try to sell the Stafford deal, but I can understand where the numbers get higher than that, but I wouldn't go much higher. Like if Goff comes in at a firm like, well, I need like $53 million a year, my answer is no. I'll tag you. So I think that's where I would kind of draw the line there with him. Jason also says, any idea how much next year's salary cap will increase? So my assumption, and I don't have my notes in front of me, because I had done a little bit more comprehensive on this way back when, but my guess is the salary cap next year is going to be 270, 273, something like that. But I do have something that would probably be a little bit more of a thought out projection. I just got to go back and look at it. Scooter, void years. Does the dead cap on future void years always accelerate once the contract ends? So if the contract ends, it'll match what that acceleration number is. Unless the player is designed to be a June 1, like a Jason Kelsey or a Fletcher Cox or someone like that. So the numbers we have in there, so for example, Diggs, where the number is $16 million or whatever next year. Those numbers are given with the presentation that the contract is going to void. So, going back to what somebody asked before about the Players Association, or really in that case, the Management Council, our numbers in those cases are more accurate because they're going to show you what the cap number is at a minimum player salary and a void year of, $5 million in proration, when the reality is that contract is going to void in 85% of the cases, and that cap number is going to be $16 million, not $5 million. So, from a futures perspective, we're much more in line with accuracy with that. But I know, again, with the PA, what they're putting out is just for the current year, not the future years. But the dead cap always accelerates. Oh, excuse me. Once that contract voids out. Subby. Eagles seem to structure many of their contracts with a low P5 in the final year of the contract with an option. With significant dead cap in the first void year, what is the advantage of doing this besides being able to prorate? So the Eagles' concept is that they're going to extend the contract of all these players. So, like with Jalen Hurts, for example, look up Jalen Hurts. So the concept with someone like a Jalen Hurts, well, I'm showing a number of $97 million, right? So that's the assumption that, all these options are picked up and then his contract voids out. The reality of it is the Eagles are looking at this like, okay, we're going to have a P5 in 2029 of whatever the minimum might be. I don't know what is that in 2029. 1.4. So let's just say 1.5 million. So we're going to have a base of 1.5. We're going to have existing prorations of 37.9, and we're going to give him another $50 million signing bonus. That'll be 10. So we're looking at a cap hit of 38, 48, 49, $50 million, not 97 million. That's basically what Philadelphia is doing. So Philadelphia's strategy is, for the most part, all based on the assumption that all of these players are going to work out. Now, they know that not everybody's going to work out, right? Like Hassan Reddick, they had a trade this year. But they're under the assumption that most of the players they anticipate being there for the long haul. There may be exceptions to the rule. So, if Hurts is going to be an exception, it means they have to have a rookie under contract at, $2 million or $5 million or whatever it is, in cap charges for the year that they let his contract void out. More likely they look to trade him at that point. But, that's really what it is. It's a what you see is what you get. So what you see on the roster this year is what you expect to see on the roster in 25, 26, 27. Like, they're not making the big changes. The changes that they're making are the draft and using the draft to have a couple of those veteran players, cycle off the team. The Fletcher Cox, the Jason Kelce's, Hassan Reddick, those guys, filter off the team, and you're going to replace them with a couple of rookies. Where the Eagles will get in trouble. So it's what they do is different than the Saints, but where the Eagles will get in trouble is if they have a run of contracts where they use those options, they use those salary conversions on the wrong players, kind of like what they did with Alshon Jeffrey. Like, that was on the wrong player. They just were able to get Alshon Jeffrey's agent to work with them on a, on a contract to be able to June 1 them. But if they get to a point to where they can't do that, that changes the equation. So, they have to, hold on, I'm just typing something here. So, anyway, sorry. So their issue is going to be if they get it wrong with a lot of guys at once, that's going to put them in a Saints situation. They haven't been there. The Hurts contract to me is the one that can get there because, like, you go back to Carson Wentz, and Carson Wentz ended up being a dud, right? They didn't really leave themselves as many outs in the Hurts contract as they had with the Wentz one. So, that's where you can run into trouble. Tulane Cubs. As we creep closer to the draft, can you discuss how the value of future picks is evolving or not? How future picks actually should be valued. So, to tackle the second part of your question, if I'm looking at a future pick, and I'm the team trading it away, not the team trading it in, team trading it away, I look at that as just simply being a mid pick in that round. Like, if I'm trading away a first round pick in 2025, I am valuing that as the 16th pick in the 2025 draft. It's ridiculous to value that as like the 64th pick or the like 45th pick or something like that. It's stupid. Absolutely stupid to say, like, well, we don't know who's available, so we just need to discount it by, a round. Like, what? Like, how are you getting that? Like, if I look at every draft in NFL history, with the exception of probably the 2013 NFL draft, a first-round pick is first-round pick. A second-round pick is second-round pick. It's very, very rare that a future pick, because I haven't seen a lot of these players to grade them, is, something that I should grade down an entire round. So, future pick, whatever that round is, just mid-round, because I don't know how the team is going to be. So, even if it's a bad team, I would say it's 16th pick of the round. Even if it's a good team, 16th pick in that round. In terms of if it's evolving, I think if you are a team that has a new general manager or a general manager that feels very confident in his job, Howie with the Eagles, Schneider with the Seahawks, stuff like that. I think they would value those future picks the same way that I do. But for people that have a shorter term approach to it, they do not. But, if I was the owner of a team, or if I was in some analytics position knowing that, I had some kind of say in it, I would be looking at those future picks and saying, you cannot trade a 1 in 2025 and tell me that's a 2. Like, that's asinine. That's stupid. Text here. Let's see what Megan has to say. Oh, we've got a Roman Reigns with a Superman punch on Cody Rhodes. Only a 2 count. 2 count. I'm glad I got that text from Megan. All right. Did the Texans get a comp pick if Diggs walks next year? That's from 1912. The answer is no. Big Uncle 3X. Do you see an adjustment to draft slot money in the next CBA? Seems like there's a huge incentive for teams to draft players over signing older, middling veterans generally, whether draft picks cost teams a higher percent of the cap or shorter contracts in the future. So, no, I do not see a change in money. But that is true. There is a huge incentive for drafting a player versus signing a player. And that's why we're at a state right now to where, with the exception of the guy who just signed with Kansas City, I think we are at a position where, you now hold off on free agents and you see what happens in the draft before you re-engage in contract talks on both sides, of that equation. I do think that the Players Association should be pushing for shorter contracts in the future. I mentioned that with the last one when it came to the CBA. It's like, look, if you are going to look for 17 games, you should be giving rookies 2 or 3 year contracts. Like, why do they need 3, 4, 5 year deals before they can be extended? Like, why? After 2 years if the guy is good or not. Like, let him get an extension. So, I know why they don't do it. They don't do it that way because the voting block of the PA is, largely players year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, you're like, well, why would we give a benefit to incoming rookies? But, if you are someone that has a legitimate interest in the benefit of the next generation of players, you should look at this and say, I'm not voting for this for me. I'm voting for this for them. And what benefits them is 2-year rookie contracts and then unrestricted free agency. So, it's like, that's what it should be. I don't know if that's where the PA will be a couple of years from now, but that's where they should be when it comes to doing it. Shoes 54. What is one thing that you've changed your mind on? Negative opinion on it, actually positive, or vice versa? What has been something contract-based or drafting that you continue to believe that the majority public do not or may not agree with? Love the pod. So I've come more around to the concept of void years if they're used on the right players. There was a time when I was very anti-void years at all. But I can agree with the concept that a dollar now is more valuable than a dollar tomorrow. But at the same time, I also know that there are positions where that dollar tomorrow has every possibility of being hit. So, there's some spots where it's like it's beneficial for you, and there's other spots where it's a negative. As for the other way around, something that I thought was a positive that ended up being a negative. I'm not sure if I can come up with something on that. I'd have to give that a lot more thought. As for that, but I think the void year thing is definitely something that I think could be much more of a positive than I thought in the past. But the other way around, I'd have to think about that a little bit more. Joe, what did the Browns gain by not restructuring Deshaun Watson this year? They just don't deal with the publicity of it. I do not see Watson having trade value. He's been awful. So, I don't see that as a possibility. I think it's more just, you've eliminated the negativity that comes with, they've taken someone who is I don't even know what the phrase is to describe him. But they've taken someone who is a not good person, and you don't have to deal with the fallout of saying, hey, they agreed to pay him $45 million of his $46 million salary, right now, even though the payouts on it would be the same regardless. I think that's the main thing. I think part of me says that there might be a possibility of thinking in the future trading him. I don't know who would want him. But I think it's more just a PR perspective. Michael, who's going to be in cap hell next year? So let's look at these numbers. The Saints, obviously. 49ers not in a good position. Browns, where are they at with the cap right now? Browns are probably not going to be in a great position. Seattle. No, Seattle's not. I don't know what Seattle's doing right now. Eagles. They have money they'll carry over. They'll be all right. Rams, they have money they'll carry. They'll be fine. So I think the teams that you look at right now are the Saints, the 49ers, and the Browns. And the Seahawks. Jacob, not having fun with some video game upstairs right now. So I think if we look forward, and I don't know if you call it cap hell, but I think as we look forward, I think we look at the Seahawks, the Browns, the 49ers, the Saints, and say, those are the four teams we look at and say, we've got some problems moving forward. Like the cap is going to dictate some of the stuff we do. When it comes to extensions, when it comes to anything. I think the cap might dictate. I think when you get into the next group of teams, the Eagles, the Rams, Texans, Bills, maybe the Dolphins, because we've got Tua in there. I think you look at that and you go, that cap could be something that dictates what we do, but we're still a little bit away. All right, hold on. We've got another Megan update. Tiffy time. It is Tiffy time. Megan loves Tiffy time. Tiffany Stratton, gymnast. Megan, big fan of Tiffy time. I don't know why Tiffy time is there during a Roman Reigns match, but Tiffy time is there. All right. Wade, how able are the Bills to take on top dollar veteran wide receiver contracts via trade like Ayuk or Higgins? So I went over that before. I don't think they're capable of doing that, barring a very wacky restructure with their original team to trade them in with like no cap hit at all, and then doing something that defers a lot of money to next year. How would they likely have to structure a contract? So, structuring a contract, if they were able to bring them in, would require like a massive signing bonus this year and no base salary. Like the lowest base salary possible, whatever that is, 1.1, 1.05, 1.2, and like a $40 million signing bonus, would be how you'd have to do that. So I don't see it, as a possibility. Brian, are the Dolphins waiting to actually make their draft picks before they restructure Tyreek? Same question about the Browns with Amari Cooper, though he might be refusing a restructure in favor of pushing for an extension. No, I think in both cases, the teams are looking at this and saying the future of those players with the team are not long-term. They're probably 2024 and fingers crossed on 25. Is Amari Cooper even under contract then? Or is this his last year? They may have some void years in there. Let me see. Yeah, they have void years in there. And Tyreek, he might be basically void years. Yeah, they have those balloon salaries in there. 21, 22, 20. Yeah, so I think sorry. You get the yawning when you're about 3.5 hours into the podcast. I think both of those teams are under the assumption those players are not going to be on the team next year. So they're holding off on any kind of restructures until 100% absolutely necessary. George, do NFL front offices worry more about cash payments or cap consequences? Cash payments, 100%. Owners are far more interested in their budgets and, what it costs them to field a football team versus, how screwed up the cap situation is. Now, there may be a couple of exceptions, but I think most of those come after the GM is gone. To where the owner might even be like, look, we've got, in terms of today's dollars, we've got a budget. I've got a budget of $250 million. Why are you not spending it? And you go, our salary cap is screwed up, and we can only spend 180. Because of all the dead money or whatever we've got. But front offices are, cash is king is the statement, and that's the bigger deal. Mark, I might have sent this in an email with the cap if the Chargers decided to trade Justin Herbert. I don't even know if I have his contract structure right. Let's take a look. $80 million this year, 73 next. Let's see. Let me pull him up. Let me see if I have his options in there. I do have them the right way. So it's a lot to trade him. It still seems off. Hold on. I have a cut in there. Let's do a trade. So. Nah, I don't see that in either of the years. It'd be $50 million dead to trade him next year. I don't see that. So it's 63.5 to trade him this year. Definitely don't see that. I don't even think they could do that. 50.158 million, loss at 12 million in cap room. I can't 100% say they wouldn't do that, but I would think it's unlikely that they would make a move like that. I think it's a hard contract trade. Sam, are you seeing any trends in contract structures these past couple of off seasons from the sharper franchises? I don't think I've seen anything different in the last 2-3 years. That 50% down thing that I mentioned, using salary advances versus bonuses. The June 1 manipulation of contracts. I don't think there's been anything beyond that. Humbaba, last year, NFL fined players totaling $7 million. What happens to this money? So that money basically gets donated to charities, stuff like that. There's no offsets on the cap for fine money. Can you see Prescott with the Giants in 2025 with Belichick? I don't see Prescott. I can't say no to Belichick. Obviously, there's a history with the Giants. But, man, they feel so far out of contention. Like, I don't know why he would take that job. I think Belichick's NFL career is over. I won't completely discount it, but I think his career is done with. Why did the Vikings sign Griffin, resulting currently in getting a 2025 third? So, again, I think it goes back to it. Number one, you can't be beholden to compensatory picks. Number two, this is just a guess of mine. I'm going to guess that the assumption is that at some point they were going to negate that third round pick anyway. Whether if it was through a free agent signing, Darnold earning some incentives, something that something was going to cancel it out anyway. So, you just move forward and do what you got to do. Dave, how do you feel about people selling the Saquon Barkley signing, comparing his contract to Gabe Davis, Mooney, Cole Kmet, etc., saying who would you rather have at that money? I feel like it's a valid argument since no draft capital was invested, just 2 years of guaranteed money. I wouldn't look at it that way, only for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think so. I won't say Barkley hasn't been that good. Barkley's been hurt. So Barkley comes with a big injury risk, number one. Number two, you can get a lot of that productivity that you see in someone like a Barkley or any running back by, throwing a bunch of darts at undrafted players or a late round draft pick, whatever. So, someone like a Gabe Davis, Darnell Mooney, yeah, I mean, they're probably overpaid, but I can't just throw a dart and say I have that same potential. I think when it comes to the running back spot, I think a dart literally has that potential. So I think that's something there. But I do think that there is something to be made of the argument that, you didn't invest the draft capital, so it is only money. So I think that's something, but, I think if I looked at it, I'll throw Cole Kmet out on the extension, but I think when I look at the availability of players in free agency, when I look at the availability of players in the draft, I would probably rather spend the money on a Gabe Davis, excuse me, or Darnell Mooney than Saquon Barkley. Even though Barkley is better relative to that position than those guys are to a wide receiver. It's just that I have a lot more avenues. I feel like on the lower cost end to get one of those guys. get a replacement running back in undrafted free agency than the others. All right. Mason, 2 questions. Can you explain guaranteed incentives and other amounts treated as signing bonus? There's no such thing as a guaranteed incentive. The only thing that would be a guaranteed incentive would be if you took a player who was basically hurt last year and put an incentive in there that was like 1% playing time. Like he was hurt all year long and he had that. So there's really nothing that's there. In terms of other amounts treated as signing bonus, it's that 50% down rule that I mentioned. If you take a workout bonus, you guarantee it. Off-season roster bonus, guarantee it. Different kind of couple of different mechanisms you can use, but basically those are the ones where you get that money and you treat it as a signing bonus. Can you explain the issue with comp picks that the Bills had and what Bean was referring to with the AAV being impacted by void years? I still don't know that answer completely. But I think what he was getting at with that, and this is something I talked with Nick about, is the only thing that made logical sense to knock some of the comp pick projections down, it still wasn't even all of them, was the fact that, where I mentioned when talking about that 50% down rule, if you happen to be listening from early on in this podcast, there are teams, Jalen Hurts, for example, people made a big deal out of it, Pro Football Talk did, where they have dummy year salaries of $99.999999 million. The NFL used to count those years as zero, but it seems as if in some cases they are valuing them at the total amount. So if you have a player like Hurts that has 5 or 6 dummy years at $99.99 million, that moves the annual value of his contract from, 51.5 to probably like 60-something million dollars. So I think that is what Bean is referring to, is that there are certain players with the way their contracts are written to where they have these void years that have dummy salaries in there that actually boost the annual value of the contract versus just not counting at all towards it. I don't really understand how that works because the way the rule was written, as I understood it, if you just have a automatic void year, it should count as zero. But clearly that is not the case. So there are certain exceptions to that, and it might be a change in interpretation by the management council. They do that all the time. So we'll have to wait and see how that works out. But I think that's what he's referring to is, these handful of teams that use these, crazy base salaries in there, that the management council somehow is actually counting them as, counting towards the cap versus off the cap. All right, last set of questions. I almost shouldn't hit this. Oh, that's a real question. Paul, if anyone really wants to start with... no, that's not a real question. All right, David, break down the Aaron Donald contract. Jordan reported $24 million cap hit this year, $9 million next year. All right, Aaron Donald. So he retires. Now, the door, it's still slightly ajar if he wants to come back. But basically what's going to happen is he's going to count for Man, I gotta look this up. So he'll count for $17 million this year, because even though they do not pick up this option, they don't pick up the full restructure. They pick up a portion of it. That stuff won't count towards the cap next year. All right, I have just gotten word that the final boss, The Rock, has won. I guess my daughter is, I don't know if she's happy with this or unhappy, but the final boss has won. So, there you go. So we're keeping you up to date on WrestleMania as we go through the podcast here. As we get close to hour number 4. I mean, that's wild. All right, so the Aaron Donald deal. So basically, yeah. So he's going to keep his bonus. That was just written that way. So he'll have a $23.7 million cap hit this year. Once he, officially is put on the retirement list. Earnings at $24.97, so that'll drop down to $23.73. In 2025, he'll have a $19.3 million cap hit, as far as I know, but they will also get a credit of about $9.6 million. So either he'll have a very high adjustment, or his number in 2025 will be around $10 million. I'm not sure what way they'll value it, but it'll be one of those two ways. So either way, the net impact will be about $10 million in 2025, but about $24 million in 2024, a little under that. Lou, who's the next Russell Wilson-like misguided contract, huge cap hit candidate? I mean, it's probably Dak, but if the Dallas Cowboys don't extend Dak, you're looking at a quarterback. I mean, it's probably Kirk Cousins right now. To see who that would be. Jason, great 7th track of an album title. I have no idea what that would be. 7th track. It's got to be one of these groups that has had I'm assuming we're talking music here. Has one of those like great albums. So you're looking at like bands like the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, maybe like Pearl Jam's like 10, maybe Nevermind by Nirvana. You're looking at one of these bands that's had like a spectacular first album, or other than the Beatles, maybe Zeppelin. There's not a lot of other bands that have a deep catalog where you can get into that. Butchie, assuming Jets draft a wide receiver, any chance with Jets with June 1 Lazard? I think that all depends on Rodgers. If Rodgers is okay with getting rid of Lazard, yeah, sure. They'll eat that cost and move on. If he's not, then no, he'll be there. Scott, S. New. Cowboys have a ton of holes and $100 million in cap room in 2025. What is their plan? Just reloading next year, maybe giving this year a pass. So, yeah, I think Dallas is looking at this year and saying, all right, coach, what can we do with this group of players? Because they obviously haven't added a lot to it, haven't subtracted a ton. What can we do with this group? And then as you get into next year, it's like Parsons clearly going to want to be extended. CeeDee Lamb is going to cost a lot of money. And then, do they or don't they with Dak Prescott? So I think most of their future money is, based on stuff that they plan on doing in the future. But I don't think they're giving this year a pass, but I don't think they want to invest more in this year. I think it's more like, can you get a better outcome with the same roster next year, as you got in 2023. Dreadful. Who's the most likely to get a contract extension first? Dak, Goff, Lawrence. Next big quarterback contract going to hit $60 million. I'm going to say no, because I think the order for that is going to go Goff, Lawrence, Dak. Maybe Lawrence, Goff, Dak. I don't think Lawrence hits 60. I don't think Goff hits 60. Dak will hit 60. But I think he's going to be the last of that group to do that. So, Graz, are teams allowed to structure contracts with void years that is June 1? No. So when we show those on OTC as a void year, it's an effective void year. But in reality, they're not structuring those deals as void years. For teams like the Saints, they've paid those players a couple $100,000 to structure their contracts that way. So teams can structure deals that way, but they're not actually a void year. I just call them effective voids. In the eyes of the league, they're not. The contract voids on the first day of the league year is like a June 1 cut to split dead money if allowed. I think that's something that will come eventually. No. I think they'll make teams do it the way they do now, which is you structure the contract to have a minimum paragraph 5 and a whatever the all those prorated bonuses are. And then what you'll do is in the following year, you'll put like a roster bonus of $70 million and say it's fully guaranteed if the player is, on the roster on the second day of the league year, which basically forces them to do a June 1 cut, which, makes the contract void, but, is not technically a void deal. 1912, will Houston get a comp pick if Diggs leaves during or after the season? No, they will not. Carol, what's your opinion of the Lions offseason? What do you think see them doing going forward? Their offseason was fine. They added a couple of guys in there. I think they've been cautiously optimistic. I think for all of the crap that Dan Campbell got from people, myself included, when he got hired with the the knee-biting comments and all that stuff, he was very realistic where he said, when they didn't make it this year, where he basically said, this was our best opportunity. Everybody guns for us now. I think that is 100% accurate. As for what they do going forward, I think they extend Goff. Maybe they extend one or two other guys, but I think the main thing is, they extend Goff and then they go from there. But, I think the coach was very realistic that last year was their best chance versus what, some people said when it was like, oh, don't worry, they'll be back. Campbell was very realistic about it and said, it's going to be hard to be back. Like it's, we were we were not the hunted. last year. We caught teams off guard. We, had a great situation when it came to our cap and everything else. And, that doesn't exist anymore. So I think he was really realistic about that. And, whether people agree with that or not, I don't know. But I think that was the case. Brian, going back to a question from January, these are PFR's most valuable seasons in the history of the NFL. Very few from quarterbacks. What do you make this valuation system? So, their AV system is based on, if I remember right, kind of offensive/defensive output and certain metrics that they include as to where that output lands. It's very slanted towards teams that are doing well and probably players that score a lot of points. I guess maybe who prevent a lot of points if we're looking defensively, but I think offensively it's players who put up a lot of points on teams that are kind of offensive juggernauts. I think we've gone down that route, and we've already determined that that's not really the case. So I don't know. I think, again, when you go back and you look at these things, and I know Lamar and Aaron Donald are up pretty high. But I think when you look at the modern NFL, from an offensive perspective, the ball is spread out so much. I think it's hard to have that kind of impact to where, you are you're going to be standing out in this kind of system, and, where you get that, that huge number as an offensive player, where you've got that gigantic AV, based on being someone that gets almost all the touchdowns in a specific offensive system. Similarly, defensively, I think that's going to be as hard. Though I'm not as up on the way their defensive system is scored as their offensive system. But yeah, I don't see that. The stuff that PFR does is much more slanted towards teams that score a lot, teams that win a lot, maybe defenses that hold teams very low in points, versus really measuring individual contributions. It's more like, all right, the team is good. How do we allocate these points within the team? Which doesn't necessarily, value play at a individual level. Justin, what is the Dolphins' cap situation next season? It's really hard to say without the quarterback under contract, right? This is the last year, I think. Dolphins bottom 10. Let me just make sure I have Tua. Yeah. So, Tua's got that bloated number the following year. Howard's number will be lower, right? Am I in 25? No, in 25. Yeah. I have Howard dead, right? Yeah, 15.6. Yeah, it's not a good. They're not in a good, position. But you've got to wait to see where the, kind of the dust settles after this year. Ralph, how much projected cap increase do you see for next year after the massive one this year? So again, that's one of those things I got to go back and look at, but you're probably going to get up to around 270, 265, 270. But I'll have a more accurate number, at least I think accurate, that I'll put up. Just looking at this. All right, I think that's it. So, if you happen to actually make it to the end of this podcast, it is 3 hours, 49 minutes, and 50 seconds as I say this right now. More power to you, because I'm amazed I made it to this point of it. Luckily, I have lots of holiday beers, so I was able to make it this far. So, sorry I will not be back next week. Hopefully the week after that, I will be back on a normal schedule, and we'll do some stuff. So, since you've got some time to think about it, if you've got some topics, let me know what they are, and I'll look into doing some topics on there versus just randomly doing some stuff when I get back. But hopefully I will do that. I'll make one last check to see if Megan has anything besides Final Boss 1. The answer is no. So I'm going to head to bed in just a couple of minutes. So thank you very much for all the questions. Thank you very much for listening if you happen to make it this far. And I will hopefully be back again in 2 weeks. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great week, and I will talk to you all again soon.